It's a mystery continent at the bottom of the world, and the largest single mass of ice on Earth. For longer than humans have walked the planet, ice has dominated Antarctica. But what about the future?
Ice melts from this continent, sea level goes up.
As Earth gets warmer, what will happen to Antarctica?
We're going into uncertain lands, uncertain future. How will the Earth respond?
Today, a pioneering team is searching for answers with a bold new plan and a revolutionary new machine.
No one has ever drilled through an ice shelf, and they present these challenges.
They must drill down nearly a mile and more than 20 million years deep into Antarctica's ancient history. In this unforgiving place, it's never been done before.
It's quite amazing when you think about where we are and what we're doing. Anything can go wrong at any minute.
The stakes are high because the secret to Earth's future lies buried in Antarctica's past. Right now on Nova, Secrets Beneath the Ice. It's the coldest, windiest, driest, and most desolate landscape on the planet, with few permanent residents except penguins and seals. This frosty continent appears locked in a perpetual ice age. A colossal cloak of ice covers almost every inch of land, and in some places, the ice is so thick and so heavy, it depresses the Earth's crust almost half a mile. Some people call it Earth's freezer, but scientists call Antarctica the ice.
Antarctica plays a fundamental role in the way the Earth functions.
For polar researchers, Antarctica is a giant laboratory more than 1.5 times the size of the United States, and home to 90% of all the ice in the world.
Anything that happens down here, anything that changes, will affect the rest of the world.
Most people don't think that change in Antarctica matters to them. But when we look at New York City and we look that it's in front of the ocean, it matters.
What would happen if all of Antarctica's ice were to melt?
Antarctica melts, sea level goes up 12 stories in New York City.
Sea levels would rise by more than 150 feet. Flooding coastal cities, displacing hundreds of millions of people. That would be a change that you could see from space. Earth would look different.
In any case, even a loss of just 10% of Antarctica's ice would be catastrophic.
It would raise the sea level over there in Manhattan about 19 feet, right up along the edge.
Big sections of Brooklyn would be underwater. Certainly the Mediterranean and some of my favorite cities like Venice would look very different.
Tens of millions of people would have to be relocated.
It would be almost a different planet.
If sea level changes and the climate around the coastal regions change, it's going to affect the climate where you live. It's going to affect the things you can grow. It's going to affect how you live.
There may be a list of things in store that come as a result of raising sea levels that we haven't even thought about yet.
Could this be our fate? Is Antarctica heading for a major meltdown? If so, it may happen over centuries. But it could already be starting because the climate is changing. And it's changing because burning fossil fuels has increased the level of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere.
Today, we have something that's completely man-made, and that is the addition of carbon dioxide being put into the atmosphere by humanity, by us.
Carbon dioxide is a greenhouse gas. It prevents the sun's heat from escaping.
I'm in the Brooklyn Botanic Garden, in a greenhouse. Greenhouses, they're basically like heat motels, where the sun's rays can come in and they get trapped inside the greenhouse. They can't get out.
So like glass in a greenhouse, gases like carbon dioxide trap solar energy in our atmosphere. But now, those levels are increasing.
The result is our Earth is now warming up.
And the ice is melting, both in Antarctica and the Arctic.
In the north, there's two clear signals. In the Arctic Ocean, you have lots of floating ice and not sticking around through the summer. That's one sign of it getting warmer. The other sign? The edges of the Greenland ice sheet are changing.
And the loss of Greenland's ice is now speeding up. In August 2010, an iceberg 4 times the size of Manhattan broke off the edge of Greenland. But Antarctica has nearly 10 times as much ice as Greenland. And in the past decade alone, rising temperatures have caused giant pieces of coastal ice to shrink or crumble. Polar researchers feared that this could be just the beginning of a chain reaction. But have Antarctica's ice sheets ever collapsed before? That's what an international team of geodetectives wants to find out.
Here we actually have some running water, some meltwater coming out of the ice.
To get a more precise picture of Antarctica's future, they plan to dig deep for answers in the past with a giant drill.
By drilling into areas around Antarctica, we're able to perceive a history that has an impact for where we're headed as a planet.
Antarctica was not always locked in a deep freeze. 160 million years ago, it was part of an enormous supercontinent closer to the equator. At the time, Earth was much warmer than today, and fossil evidence suggests this giant landmass was a tropical habitat teeming with dinosaurs. Eventually, the supercontinent broke apart, and Antarctica drifted south. As Earth was getting colder, falling carbon dioxide levels and powerful ocean currents cooled the isolated continent even further. And then, around 34 million years ago, ice slowly began to form. It would take millions of years for Antarctica to finally lock into a deep freeze. And during that time, it remained warm enough for plant life to survive. Evidence of that was recently unearthed in a relatively ice-free valley in the interior. Here, geologists Alan Ashworth and Adam Lewis find a remarkable fossil.
Oh, a leaf. Is that a leaf? There's a leaf right there.
Hey! That leaf fell into the mud maybe 20 million years ago.
That may be the best leaf yet.
That's a sweet leaf.
And then they find something extraordinary.
This is like a peat moss. And then if we, tease some of this out, they're like freeze-dried.
Under the microscope, these brittle mosses are in pristine condition. These moss fossils are not rock, but actual plant tissue, the last vestiges of vegetation from a time when Antarctica was still warm. They were found under a layer of volcanic ash that dates back millions of years.
This is the original moss tissue, and even the cells are preserved in these fossils.
These plants were flash frozen when Antarctica plummeted into a deep freeze that preserved them until today.
It's mind-boggling. The only way is to say the climate remained very, very cold, it remained very, very dry, and it did not warm up for even relatively short periods of time in this location. Otherwise, these things are gone.
Now, as Earth is heating up, what will happen to Antarctica? Will it melt, raising sea levels all over the planet? How sensitive is this frozen land to the temperature changes we currently face? But before researchers can investigate in Antarctica, last-minute testing is taking place here, over 2,000 miles away, in the countryside of New Zealand, with a brand new drill.
Yeah, it's a shakedown. We've got a few leaking connections and things that don't quite fit as well as they need to, a little bit of modifications required. Pretty common with a brand new piece of equipment.
Weighing in at a whopping 40 tons, this mechanized marvel is as heavy as a humpback whale, and just as large. Towering some 5 stories high, the giant rig will soon dwarf everything in sight, except the ice.
This will be the largest drill rig in Antarctica that's used on land.
And this mammoth rig can drill in more than one place. That's because it's mounted on a sled.
I think it probably is unusual. All of the equipment is on sledges, so in Antarctica we pull it all with big bulldozers.
It's been specially designed to drill from the ice in order to extract hidden secrets from beneath Antarctica itself. This unique multinational enterprise is called ANDRIL, the Antarctic Drilling Project. For team leader David Harwood, it's a dream come true.
As a scientist, there's a passion. There's a passion that comes in trying to figure this out, trying to identify what has been the past history of the ice sheet, and wondering what the future might hold.
Soon, the giant drill will be dismantled and ready for a long sea voyage.
We'll then start the final screening process. That will get you to take your extreme cold weather jackets off.
But now, the ANDRIL team gathers at Christchurch, New Zealand, for the 6-hour flight to Antarctica in a C-17 cargo plane, jam-packed with people and gear. Their flight passes over the Trans-Antarctic Mountains, which divide the continent into 2 regions, with colossal glaciers called ice sheets blanketing both. The giant East Antarctic ice sheet is 10 times the size of the West. It's frozen firmly to bedrock, high above the sea, and in some places, the ice towers almost 3 miles into the sky. The smaller West Antarctic ice sheet is less stable. That's because it rests on land well below sea level, and it extends hundreds of miles over the ocean in floating ice shelves. It's likely East and West Antarctica will respond very differently to a warming world. The ANDRIL team touches down in the west, on an icy runway at McMurdo Station, the largest U.S. research base in Antarctica. As David Harwood and Richard Levy step out onto the ice, the first thing they notice is the weather.
Breeze is a bit chilly, but it's beautiful. It's good to be back.
It's October, springtime, and it's minus 20 degrees.
It's the earliest I've ever been down to Antarctica, and it's very cold. When the wind picks up, it's rather an unpleasant place to be working. When the wind isn't blowing and the sun's shining, it's actually really quite nice, but very cold.
But even a sunny afternoon can turn nasty at a moment's notice.
It's a beautiful day!
Come on, guys!
McMurdo Station has been a vital hub of research for over half a century. What began as a tiny outpost has over the years grown into a small town. McMurdo houses a population of 200 people year-round. But during the research season, it becomes home base for over 1,000. Every year, McMurdo supports scores of research projects, providing lab facilities, food and supplies, and survival training for teams of scientists who will head out to remote field camps. This season, those numbers include the ANDRIL team of over 50 technicians and researchers from the US, New Zealand, Germany, and Italy. Andril is funded by their governments and the National Science Foundation.
There's probably a week at least of work in McMurdo where we have to get all of our gear sorted out, getting everything we need in order to be able to work and survive out in the field.
As they gather supplies for more than a month on the ice, one item is in high demand.
Sugar actually heats your body. It gives you quick energy, especially if you're like freezing and we expect to be very cold. We don't really know how much chocolate is enough. We can take up to 560 candy bars, but I'm looking at this and I'm already getting queasy. I'm like, oh, I don't know if I can eat this or not.
Hey, David!
As Andril researchers prepare for life in the field, they join hundreds of other scientists fanning out across Antarctica, and many are focused on the same question. Could Antarctica be headed for a meltdown?
Over here is Mount Boreas.
We're going to have a lot of scientists working together
There is a little bit of volcanic ash.
and challenging each other's theories, challenging what we know.
Look at that.
As a community, we're going to find the answers.
But the continent won't give up its secrets easily. The stark beauty of Antarctica masks a treacherous nature. More than 70% of all the fresh water in the world is harbored here. But most of that water is frozen. And with less precipitation than the Sahara, Antarctica is the driest desert on Earth. Raging winds of up to 200 miles per hour sometimes blast the frozen terrain, where temperatures can drop to 100 degrees below zero. Only during the short Antarctic summer can most researchers gather precious scientific data from this giant mystery continent.
Coming up at 292 for drift. Copy. Waiting to ride. That's all that, and should be.
A 4-hour flight and 400 miles from McMurdo is the center of the West Antarctic ice sheet. And for one team, this is the best way to find out about the past.
This is the side of a snow pit. It's a thin wall between two pits. The other side is open so that light can shine through, and you can really see the different layers in the pit. So this is 1 year's worth of snow accumulation, and there's a second year's worth of snow accumulation here below it. 2 years of record right here in the snow pit. And of course, we want to go back a lot further in time than that. In order to do that, we can't just use shovels and chainsaws like we did here, so we have to use a drill.
Ken Taylor's team is drilling through ice. Their goal is to gather samples from the nearly 2-mile-thick West Antarctic ice sheet. And the deeper they go, the further back in time they travel.
Here, we're at about 480 meters deep right now. This is right around the time when Jesus lived. It's right about 0 AD, right when BC years turned into AD years.
These ice cores contain tiny bubbles of ancient atmosphere that were trapped each year as the snow was compressed into ice.
Yeah, nice bubbles in this one. That's ancient air in there. When we crush samples like this, that'll get the gas out of there and we can sample the ancient atmosphere. We can also get a record of how things like temperature and sea ice changed in the past. And by combining these different records, we can understand how the climate system has operated in the past.
But the ice record, valuable as it is, only goes back about 800,000 years, a tiny fraction of geologic time. To get a more complete picture of Antarctica's climate history, you have to drill farther back in time. And that's what the Andril team is trying to do. They want to paint a picture of Antarctica as it changed from warm to cold millions of years ago. In order to do that, Andril will have to drill deep into the Earth. But finding the right location is a major challenge on a continent covered by ice. And even in those few places where the ice has receded, it's still not easy. Andril's David Harwood and Richard Levy are searching for places to drill. But as they fly over a field of rubble, they see that gathering evidence for a chronological history is not possible here. Something has stirred things up, and that something is the ice itself. That's because ice moves. For tens of millions of years, glaciers have slowly scoured the land, gobbling up rocks and debris and spreading them all across the landscape in random order.
This we call glacial paleontology. Some call it garbage pile paleontology because we're looking and sorting through these moraines to try to get pieces of information that the ice sheet has brought to us.
A moraine is the chaotic accumulation of rocks and debris deposited by glacial movement.
This one here actually has abundant shell fossils.
This shell, brought here by a glacier, comes from a time when the continent was warmer and water ran through these valleys. This landscape is a treasure trove of Antarctica's climate history. But the ice has scrambled all the clues.
We're looking at a jigsaw puzzle.
Yet there's one place where the evidence remains intact. That's in the seafloor beneath the Antarctic ice shelf, where the glacial movement has also deposited layer after layer in chronological order.
Drilling gives us an opportunity to get a serial history in time. Each layer goes back in time, and we know that a rock above was younger than a rock below, so we can put it into a history.
The Andrill team aims to drill through the Antarctic ice and the sea below. Then, like a straw thrust through a layer cake, they'll bore deep into the ocean floor in order to recover millions of years of rock and mud that trace Antarctica's climate history. Even after ice began to form in Antarctica around 34 million years ago, the continent remained warm enough for plant life to survive, a lot like areas of New Zealand today, where ice can be found bordered by trees and plants. But when did Antarctica plunge into a solid deep freeze? And how did it happen? Was it gradual or abrupt? Will the story of how Antarctica changed from greenhouse to icehouse reveal new clues about the continent's climate future and our own?
Charlie, I am David Harwood.
The Andrill team will spend the next few weeks searching for drilling locations from the surface of the ice. But David Harwood remains focused on what lies below.
When I'm driving across there, I'm always thinking about what's beneath us. I'm over about 15 feet of ice, and over that, I'm over about 1,500 feet of water, and then into the sediments below that.
Here at the bottom of the world, the sun never sets in the summer. And as night blends into day, the work begins in earnest. The team heads out to McMurdo Sound, a place where the ocean freezes annually, creating a precarious platform of floating sea ice that will only last a few months.
We're standing right now in the southern part of McMurdo Sound. Seasonally, this region will break out. The sea ice that we're standing on will melt out. It's now strong enough, perhaps 20 feet beneath us is the thickness of ice, and then 1,500 feet of water beneath us as well.
Just to be sure they're in the right place,
Fire in the hole.
the team blasts powerful sound waves through the sea ice and into the seafloor below. The result is a sonic street map of layer after layer of rock and mud, each one representing a different era of the past.
By looking into the past, we can maybe project into the future. How dynamic has been the behavior of the ice sheets? Have they been static and slowly changing? How active a player have they been?
Finally, it's time to tow the giant drill out onto the ice. To ensure that the weight of the rig isn't supported by the sea ice alone, divers attach flotation devices to the drilled pipe. And at the end of that pipe is a whirling tool with a unique cutting edge. A drill bit made of diamonds that can bore through almost everything in its path.
The diamond core system that we have, it's almost like melting the core down through the rocks. It just cuts through whatever's there. If you hit a big boulder, you'll just end up with a cylinder of that boulder. it'll just keep going.
Now the real drilling begins. There's not a minute to waste because the Antarctic research season is so short. The crews work around the clock to recover cores of rock that trace Antarctica's ancient past. The powerful drill bores down over 3/4 of a mile, bringing up 12 feet of core at a time, each foot averaging 1,000 years of climate history. It's an astonishing feat.
It's quite amazing when you think about where we are and what we're doing. We've got a drill rig, a 60-ton to 90-ton with all the equipment on it drill rig sitting behind us here on 8 meters of sea ice, above 380 meters of water, and then we're drilling down into the seafloor below that with a 3 to 4 inch diameter pipe that's turning round and round like a piece of spaghetti hanging down through the water and into the ground, and it's wobbling around a bit, and we're turning around and bringing core up from deep within the earth. Anything can go wrong at any minute with this process.
And all too soon, it does. Sometimes even a drill bit made of diamonds can run into trouble.
We haven't been getting particularly good quality core, and we're suspecting that the drill bit has been damaged. In places it's a little bit narrower than it should be for the size of the diamond bits, and that means we have to pull all of our pipe out. It's about 1,700 meters, and replace the bit, and then put the pipe back down the hole, and that's going to take us about 24 hours to 36 hours.
Removing and replacing nearly a mile of pipe is no easy task, especially when it's your job to change it all out, piece by piece. But for other members of the Andrill team, it's a welcome break. In an extreme environment like Antarctica, nobody's on a diet. Your body is working so hard to stay warm, packing away 6,000 calories or more a day is not an indulgence, it's a necessity.
Is there coffee on the stove?
And because Antarctica is drier than the hottest desert, dehydration is a constant concern. And keeping the drill up and running is another. Finally, after a day and a half of hard work, the new bid is in place, and drilling is back on track. They recover a 12-foot length of core, wrapped in a protective cover. Workers carefully carry it back to the lab to be examined. When they crack it open, it's in perfect condition. This mud and rock is more valuable than gold because each core is a time machine.
We're currently down at a depth of about 440 meters.
That's about a quarter mile down, corresponding to a time at least 15 million years ago, when Antarctica was still warm. As the cores are recovered, each section is sliced lengthwise, X-rayed, and scanned in labs at the drill site and back at McMurdo.
These cores came out of the ground 3 days ago. They were split yesterday. They were imaged yesterday. Sedimentologists worked the night shift 12 hours, describing these cores millimeter by millimeter, looking at the color, size ratios, any kind of structure they see in a core, trying to understand how these sediments were deposited.
Each core tells a story depending on its texture, color, and contents. And some of those stories are spectacular.
We're seeing some macrofossils, some large shells.
These shells are evidence of warmer times, even as Antarctica is icing up.
This is one of the most spectacular fossils found within Andrill this season. This is a scallop. Now, this kind of scallop simply do not live in extreme polar waters.
And there are other clues, some of them nearly invisible. Hidden inside these cores are shells of microscopic algae called diatoms. For Andrel climate detectives, these tiny diatoms create a highly revealing picture of the past. Because not all diatoms are alike. Some species are adapted to colder conditions, while others flourish in warmer waters.
We use them as biological markers, index of different environmental conditions, cold or warm, frozen waters or open ocean waters.
Again, the Andrel team examines cores from around 15 million years ago. They find smooth green sands containing diatoms that thrived in relatively warm water, confirming this was a time before Antarctica finally froze over.
This is a very well-defined warm period. Iceberg-free waters, open waters where diatoms are growing and thriving. You can see this persisted for quite some time.
A picture is beginning to form of a long period of transition, starting 34 million years ago, when a cooling climate led to the formation of ice. But even so, conditions remained relatively mild. But when did Antarctica finally slip into a deep freeze? The answer lies in cores from around 14 million years ago. Instead of smooth and green, these cores are rocky and gray, and some contain diatoms that thrived in cold glacial waters. This amazing discovery reveals a rapid change from cool to frozen. It fills in what has always been a blank page in Antarctica's climate history. Next season, they'll attack another crucial question. After Antarctica froze 14 million years ago, did the ice ever melt? Or has it remained a frozen wilderness right up until today? That answer will have to wait. Cracks in the sea ice tell the team it's time to return to base.
We've seen the ice break in quite a bit in the last month, but it's not broken in anywhere further south than it is right now.
We can only be on this site for so long before the sea ice starts to melt, before the conditions change, and for safety reasons we have to get off the sea ice.
The precarious sea ice of West Antarctica may come and go with the seasons. But what about the giant East Antarctic ice sheet? A mountain of ice so high it covers mountains.
This is like an MRI of the ice sheet. Some places it's really thick, 2 miles thick, and pretty flat and boring. But then there are other places where what we discovered were hidden mountain ranges the size of the Appalachians, but totally hidden by the huge East Antarctic ice sheet.
There's 10 times as much ice in the east as in the west. But a small portion of the east has almost no ice at all. It's an unearthly location that defies the very image of Antarctica. These are the dry valleys, cold, barren, and except for a few scientists, almost completely devoid of life. The landscape is so alien, NASA has used it as a test site for space programs.
It's a fantastic place. You can't find this anywhere else on Earth. Its closest analog is the surface of Mars.
Mullins Valley is the ultimate remote field camp. It serves as home base for a pioneering band of glaciologists led by Dave Marchant. Marchant and his team are conducting research the rugged, old-fashioned way. They'll live in tents and won't be picked up for 2 months. They need to be self-sufficient, and for the most part, they like it that way.
Good day.
Burritos.
The
good thing about working out here is that it's actually a double-edged sword. You come out here, you have no contact with the outside world, no email, no real telephone contact, so you can totally immerse yourself in the science. And that allows you to think 24 hours a day about what you're doing. The other side of that is you have no idea what's going on outside. Hi.
At the beginning of the season, I didn't like it when you would breathe and the frost would form on the outside of the sleeping bag, but it's warmed up now and it's a little more comfortable in the morning.
Small setups like we have, which are helicopter supported, are isolated. They're among the most isolated in the region. And as a result, we have to check in daily with McMurdo. I'm trying to heat the batteries up so that we can get a signal out. Right now, there appears to be no satellite coverage and the batteries are a little bit cold, so I'm trying to warm it up. Sometimes you have to contort your body in various ways to get the signal. No, we're not, we don't have enough signal yet. Well, here we go. We've got something that might work. Mac Ops, this is Gulf 054 Mullins Valley. We have 7 on board and all is well. Over. We lost transmission. This valley holds an incredible record. This area is so dry and so cold that the landscape is pristine. The rocks we see here are millions of years old.
Marchant believes that little has changed here for millions of years.
What to me is exciting is that we're walking on an ancient landscape. Imagine living 10 million years ago in Antarctica. This is what you'd see, exactly as it is today, hardly modified at all.
But when Marchant's team drilled beneath this rubble, they found something totally unexpected. A hidden glacier that extends hundreds of feet below the surface.
This is, in my opinion, the oldest dated buried glacier on Earth.
Is it all out? Yep, it's all out. Are you getting it? Yeah.
The evidence comes from volcanic ash. The dry valleys are surrounded by extinct volcanoes that erupted millions of years ago.
We're finding ash deposits on top of ice. Ash dates are coming back as old as 8 million years.
And according to Marchant, this volcanic ash shows this hidden glacier, once frozen, has never melted.
This is volcanic ash that erupted from a volcano and has been sitting there for millions of years. It shows no chemical alteration, which you'd expect if there were any amount of liquid meltwater over that duration. The fact that it's dry and pristine tells me it's always been here, which is incredible.
Equally astonishing, and just 300 miles away, there appears to be a completely different picture. Exploring East Antarctica, closer to the South Pole, Andrill's David Harwood found leaf fossils and pieces of wood. Surprisingly, according to Harwood, these date to a relatively recent time, when Antarctica was not only warmer than today, there were plants and trees.
This is a piece of southern beech. This wood is not fossilized in the sense that it is petrified. It could still burn. To find the wood and leaves together is pretty phenomenal. It's really phenomenal for Antarctica, particularly for Antarctica in this time period, about 4 million years ago.
This season, the drill is set up to find evidence of what happened in Antarctica during this period, 3 to 5 million years ago. It's a time known as the Pliocene.
Now, what's important about that is that the Pliocene was globally warmer than today.
The same temperatures as our Earth may be headed for at the end of the century, if climate change predictions are correct.
If we go back 3 to 5 million years into the geological past, we know that that was a time when Earth's climate was warmer than it is today, perhaps by 3 to 4 degrees. So it's the best example we have of where the climate's heading in the next 100 years.
The drill's new location is on the giant Ross Ice Shelf, which extends out and over the ocean. It's the largest ice shelf in the world, and it helps hold back the massive Antarctic ice sheet from flowing into the sea.
These ice shelves are very important. What they do is hold back the flow of ice that's actually trying to flow out into the ocean. We call that buttressing.
If warming oceans cause the Ross Ice Shelf to break up and melt into the sea, the West Antarctic ice sheet would eventually follow right behind. The Andril team is looking for the answer to a critical question. When Earth was warming during the Pliocene, what happened to the ice? Did the Ross Ice Shelf melt, taking the giant ice sheets with it? Drilling on an ice shelf brings with it a unique set of technological challenges. Including constant problems with mud and water. Unlike drilling through sea ice, which is just 26 feet thick, the ice shelf here is 400 feet.
We're looking at least doubling or trying to double our capability below the sea floor and penetrate to 1,000 meters or better into the sea floor.
But that's only the beginning.
No one has ever drilled through an ice shelf, and they present these challenges. The ice shelves, they float up and down with the tide, so you've got to deal with this vertical elevation change. They move sideways, they flow, so eventually your drill pipe's going to get bent.
Can the drill bore through a thick layer of ice that's constantly moving without breaking or getting yanked out of the sea floor? To confront this unique challenge head-on, the Andril team invents a new tool, a hot water drill. This marvel of engineering is a moving ring of heat that blasts jets of steaming water to melt a wide hole so the drill can operate freely through 400 feet of shifting ice. And once again, time is so precious, the team must work around the clock, not only retrieving cores, but also analyzing them. It's 2 a.m., but you wouldn't know it. Geologists are busy logging cores like it's early afternoon.
We're laying out the cores in a proper sequence from top, the very highest point of the core, all the way to the very slowest point of the core here.
An 80-foot core that dates back about 3 million years is closely examined. It contains microfossils of single-celled animals known as forams. They're from the crucial warm period called the Pliocene. And these tiny shells are precise indicators of ocean temperature.
These guys are about the size of a grain of sand. Because the same species lived through time, we can use the chemistry of modern examples to allow us to calibrate, if you like, the chemistry of the ancient examples.
What Gav's doing here is he's measuring the amount of two metals, magnesium and calcium, that are in the ocean and get incorporated into the shell of the foram when it's growing in that ocean. And that process is dependent on the temperature of the ocean. So if we know the magnesium, we know the calcium, we can determine the temperature of the ocean at the time that foram lived.
And because of that, Andril researchers can now calculate Antarctic water temperatures during the Pliocene.
What this is telling us is temperatures were 3 to 4, perhaps 5 degrees above present.
Even just 1 degree rise in ocean temperatures in the waters surrounding Antarctica will attack and begin to melt the ice shelves from below very quickly. The air temperatures will stay cold enough to keep things frozen at the surface, but what we're worried about is the ice being attacked from beneath, not from above.
And the cores reveal that this is what happened during the Pliocene, when global climate was warming. But they display even more change than expected, revealing not only a patchwork of glacial rubble, but also smooth mud from open seas, indicating that ice both froze and then melted many times.
There's a really important change right here. This interval shows us quite a dramatic change in the environment. There was ice, and then there was no ice.
The ice sheet has gone backwards and forwards. It's advanced and it's retreated.
As they examine core after core from the Pliocene, they continue to see surprising signs of change.
The results of the drilling are simply spectacular. They give us a picture of a dynamic ice sheet coming and going regularly more than 60 times.
What we're seeing in this record is telling us that Antarctica is not just a benign spectator, it's a player.
What this means is while it was generally warm during the Pliocene, there were also brief periods of cooling, and the ice was exquisitely sensitive to even small changes in climate. Just a few degrees could tip the scale from ice to no ice. So what's in store for our future? As Earth continues to warm, how much Antarctic ice will melt? And how high will sea levels rise? Andril scientists turn to computer models by Rob DeCanto and Dave Pollard.
We developed these climate models based on our best understanding of the physics of the climate system and, in this case, ice sheets.
And now, information from Andril is added to the climate model.
This is a computer model simulation of the Antarctic ice sheet over the last several million years and covers a good chunk of the interval that was recovered by the Andril sediment core. So we're looking for the same kind of behavior in our models that we're seeing in the geological record.
As the model simulates the warming periods of the Pliocene, all of the ice shelves disappear, followed by the entire West Antarctic ice sheet and edges of the East. And as temperatures change, the ice refreezes and melts again and again.
And that's important because the changes in the ice sheet that we're seeing here reflect pretty significant changes in sea level.
According to DeCanto's model, sea levels rose about 23 feet during the Pliocene. Temperatures back then were 3 to 5 degrees higher than now. Just what's projected to take place by the end of the century. But there's a lag time in the way ice responds that may delay the impact for hundreds, if not thousands of years. Regardless, coastal cities all over the world would be at risk, potentially displacing millions.
We would be remapping places like Boston and New York, the Bay Area, not to mention, of course, places like Louisiana, Miami, New Orleans, of course.
But even that might not be the worst case scenario.
Things were very similar to today in terms of our climate.
Tim Naish brings Rob DeCanto to New Zealand to look at a possibility that's even more frightening.
This is the first time I've seen the actual direct evidence for what the models are doing.
You're seeing a deepening sea level rise up through here. We're going to look at some rocks that are the same age as rocks we've drilled in Antarctica that give us the record of global sea level changes.
Here along the Rangitikei River, tectonic forces have raised the land and the river has cut into the earth to expose layer after layer of sediment that once was the sea floor. What they find are shells dated to the warming era of the Pliocene. These shells provide a way to chart sea level in the past because some of these species still exist today.
Many of these shells you see in here actually live today. So they live around the coastline, and we know the water depths they live in today. So by breaking them out of these rocks and identifying them, we can say the depth they were living over 3 million years ago.
Because these shellfish live on the sea floor and can only survive in water at specific depths, they suggest that sea levels in the Pliocene were much higher than even the computer models predict.
This is really it, Rob. This is where we would say we have the evidence for sea level being up to as much as 20 metres above present.
That's over 60 feet. In order for sea level to have risen that high, an enormous amount of ice must have melted. And this raises a startling possibility that a large part of the vast East Antarctic ice sheet melted along with the West. And if it melted once, could it melt again?
That could be a very bad thing because that would actually produce a contribution to future sea level change that we really haven't been thinking about.
This presents an even more dangerous and unpredictable picture of Antarctica.
What's been surprising is even geologists thought that glaciers and ice sheets were these large static features, which we would never really see change in our lifetime. But glacial processes are no longer quite as glacial. Things are moving faster than we had thought.
What's driving these changes are rising levels of greenhouse gases.
In the next 5 years, greenhouse gas levels will be like they were in the Pliocene. But we're not just going back to the Pliocene. Some of the projections put CO2 levels at twice the concentrations of the Pliocene by the end of the next century. We're essentially going back to the time of the dinosaurs, when there was very little ice on the planet and there were forests covering Antarctica.
And signs of change are already here. Scientists were completely caught by surprise when in 2002, the Larsen ice shelf shattered apart without warning in just a few weeks. And today, the Wilkins ice shelf, a block of ice approximately the size of Connecticut, barely hangs on.
I would say it's inevitable that West Antarctica will disappear. How long it will take East Antarctica to engage is something that's not yet known.
In the coming years, the Andro team will continue to explore Antarctica's climate history in order to gain valuable insight into Earth's future. With each new core, we gain new knowledge about a continent that's always been shrouded in mystery. But its fate remains very much tied to our own.
A weary ocean traveler returns to the shores of an island paradise. For millennia, great oceanic currents have brought visiting giants to these magical shores. An island where deep-sea leviathans roam close to land. One of the greatest oceanic shows on Earth. But why are so many of these great sea creatures drawn to this island? For centuries, Sri Lanka and its hidden treasures have seduced travelers from around the globe. Enticed by tales of rare spices and ancient civilizations, Indian, Arab, and European adventurers were drawn to this irresistible island. What they found was a land of extraordinary riches, of foreign gods and faith in nature. With herds of Asian giants, and creatures found nowhere else on Earth. But what they didn't know was that the real treasures of Sri Lanka can be found even before you step foot on its shore. the Indian Ocean, the island of Sri Lanka stands as a crossroad for all kinds of migrating marine life. Just off the coast is one of the world's biggest gatherings of the largest predator. The sperm whale. Nomads of the sea, they're almost continuously on the move. Prospectors returning from a world where the sun's rays cannot penetrate. After as long as an hour in the deep, they return to the surface to breathe. Before they dive again, they fertilize the surface. To save energy in the depths, they shut down their non-critical organs, and that includes the ability to defecate. This is one of the only ways that nutrients locked in the world below are returned to life near the top. In the expanse of the open ocean, their most stable reference points are each other. Here off the coast of Sri Lanka, they gather in numbers. Superpods, some of the largest seen anywhere in the oceans. Diving down to over 2 kilometers, they grapple with giant squid in the depths. These are hungry hunters. Each one of them can eat around a ton of food a day. It's thought that they can stun their prey by producing some of the loudest sounds of any living creature. But their life in the world below, where the pressure would crush a human, has never been filmed and remains a mystery. Somehow, the rich waters of Sri Lanka can satisfy the appetite of so many visiting giants. Circling this island is an ocean like no other. All thanks to a unique combination of natural and geological quirks. At the tip of India, Sri Lanka is the southernmost point of a huge tapering continental landmass. The island has a mountainous heart, bound by a ring of fertile coastal plains. Rivers litter the land, and together with strange weather patterns, these are the perfect ingredients for an underwater paradise. To the east, west, and south, the ocean stretches unbroken for thousands of miles. It's not just whales. Schools of fish and huge flocks of seabirds cross thousands of miles of ocean to reach these shores. For some drifters, Sri Lanka is the first sight of land for years, possibly decades. Green turtle. She is one of 5 species of sea turtle that are born on these shores. the moment she's waited 20 years for is near. She spent the years riding the currents of the deep ocean. But now she must gain strength. So she's returned to the sun-drenched shallows, more fruitful than the open water, grazing on seagrass and weeds, whipped up by the waves. Our science has no idea how, but she knows exactly the beach to which she must return. The beach she was born on. And on which she will lay her eggs. The secret to Sri Lanka's fertile waters actually lies 100 miles away. It's a story that begins on its peaks. Sri Lanka is a land powered by rain. Warm monsoon winds sweep down from the Bay of Bengal, bringing moisture from far at sea. As they hit the central highlands, they rise, they cool, and the northeast monsoon begins. It's weeks since a single drop of rain fell. But when the monsoon clouds finally burst, the highlands are inundated. Meters of rainfall in just a few months. Giving birth to 105 major rivers, a staggering number considering the island's small size. It's these rivers that are key to the rich seas surrounding Sri Lanka. Starting life in mysterious high-altitude cloud forests. Leaves and debris are washed down the mountains. They work their way through impenetrable jungles. Collecting sediment, nutrients from the earth. En route, they water vast plantations of green gold, famous Ceylon tea. Across the vast plains that circle the island, where great wild herds are sustained by the life-giving water. And in turn, they add their waste to the rich mix of nutrients. They finally mix with the sea in brackish swamps, the mangroves. A transitional no man's land between the sea and the coast. Their leaves have special glands, secrete salt crystals, allowing the trees to cope with the water from approaching time. Rising out of the waterlogged swamp floor, roots reach from the earth like dead men's fingers. Below the surface, mangroves are vital nurseries for young fish, the roots providing protection from predators. But with so much competition, one mangrove specialist has developed an extraordinary way of getting a bite to eat. It begins with his dual-action eyes. The bottom part of his eye is used for living down in the murky brown water. But on top, his eyes are suited for spying into the world above. He presses his tongue down against a groove at the bottom of his mouth, forming a gun barrel. And he fires. He misses. He doubles back and lines up again. For a young archerfish, it can take a few attempts to get his prey. He has to learn to judge distortions and reflections in the water. Amazingly, the archer can produce a watery arrow that is up to 6 times stronger than his muscle power. Dawn on the The island's most ostentatious seasonal visitor has arrived. Greater flamingos, named for the flashes of flame-like pink on their wings. They follow the receding tide further out into the lagoon. The water must be just the right depth. Wiggling their legs, they stir up the mud. Dipping their bills, they sift out shrimp and algae, which thrive in the river mouth. Males squabble and jostle for position in the group. They can grow large on this rich soup, with the biggest males reaching nearly 1.5 meters in height. They say you are what you eat, and it is the carotene pigment from crustacean algae that gives their plumage its distinctive pink. Minerals and organic matter from hundreds of rivers and streams nourish coastal communities. Sri Lanka's high rates of freshwater discharge causes a riot at sea. Fleets of fishing boats take to the waves. Endless schools of fish lie in wait. Hunters arrive, Tuna. The schools dart out of the way of the predators. Thousands of shimmering bodies try to confuse the hunters. The schools pulse in one coordinated movement. But the tuna are themselves in danger from above. For these fishermen, big money is in tuna, if they can find them. They're impossible to spot from the surface, but the fishermen are guided by the ocean's greatest acrobats. Spinner dolphins are often found swimming alongside schools of tuna. Superpods of thousands of dolphins congregate on the country's coast. Young calves cling to their mother's sides. Spinner dolphins live up to their name, rotating spectacularly as they leap meters out of the water. They start attempting it from an early age, but it's an acquired skill. Why spinners spin is a mystery. Some think it's for communication. Others believe it removes parasites stuck to the dolphin's skin. But perhaps it's just because they can. These huge gatherings of dolphins are some of the largest anywhere. But with overfishing by local and Indian fishermen, they may be a shadow of what they once were. The monsoon rains leave rich pickings in the wake. Like a gold rush, everyone prospects. The daily catch brings egrets. Slyly, they bide their time, waiting for the right moment to steal a bite. But some still prefer to catch their own. In the lagoons, flocks of cormorants dive for fish. Working in small groups, they drive a school together. Breaking the bones of his catch helps it to slip down. But if he's not quick enough, he'll lose his meal to thieves. Most water birds have feathers that repel water, but not the cormorant. It makes him an excellent diver, although his feathers do need to be hung out to dry. Flocks of cormorants, egrets, and painted storks gather in large, excited breeding colonies. When food is abundant, it's the safest time to raise a family. For their neighbor, the white-bellied sea eagle, it's also time to nest. These graceful flies mate for life. Each year, acrobatic flights in unison renew the pair's bonds. These heavy birds are the largest on the island and can reach up to 4.5 kilos. So finding a tree suitable for the whole family isn't easy. The sacred fig tree, towering above the cultivated land, has been allowed to survive. It makes a perfect roost. They've used the same nest, now a huge pile of sticks, year after year. The pair have a 6-week-old chick. As he's got older, they're leaving longer and longer gaps between bringing him meals, perhaps to entice him into the air. He's yet to be fed today, but his parents seem to have other concerns. Eagles don't like monkeys, and the feeling is mutual. Crows and eagles tend not to get on too well either. The sacred tree is home to all sorts. And some residents, like palm squirrels, happy neighbors. The same can't be said for crows. Crows will mob the eagles relentlessly. They see the predators as a threat. The truth is, the white-bellied sea eagle survives almost entirely on food caught at sea. The white belly of the adults blurs with the bright sky as they descend on their prey. From below, it's rendered invisible. He's not quite ready. At last, fresh fish. But after being kept hungry for so long, a peck on Dad's leg shows his frustration. In a few more weeks, he could be fishing for his own dinner. Bounty. Fishermen here seem to constantly see. They continue to haul in their nets at night. It's the driest time of year, and the seas are calm. Our expectant mother knows her time has come. Hauling herself up beyond the reaches of the waves. On On land, her flippers are cumbersome. She was born on this beach, and now she's returned to lay eggs of her own. Tonight she continues a ritual performed by her ancestors. This scene has played out since prehistory. She carefully buries her clutch. Her eggs must remain dry. They'll remain underneath the sand for 7 weeks. And she returns to the waves. Different species use the same beaches. Life goes full circle within just a few moments. While one species is laying, another is hatching. An eager olive ridley sea turtle is the first of her siblings to break the surface. They've remained buried for several weeks. They've waited until the sand cooled, and they knew it was night. Soon she's joined by her brothers and sisters, and the sand is a writhing mass of baby turtles. They know instantly which way to head. Perhaps it's the slope of the sand, or a faint glow of white on breaking waves. But somehow they sense the sea. Only a few centimeters in size, they face a migration before they reach the water. An exhausting start to life. They're in a race against the sun. It may be, during her crawl down the beach, the hatchling sets an internal compass, imprinting the location of her home. Most will make it in darkness. Once there is light in the sky, predators will be. Crows are gathering. A baby turtle would be a decent breakfast. With this species facing a high risk of extinction, every one of this clutch is precious. Scientists estimate, even for those who make it to the waves, just 1 in 1,000 will survive to adulthood. The last straggler, exhausted, must rest before the final push. A fatal pause. More dangers may await beyond the breakers, but those making it off the beach give these endangered animals a chance. In the southwest of the country, the second monsoon announces its arrival. The land's drenched, the rivers pumping nutrients out into these seas. These lands are blessed with two monsoons. One the northeast and one the southwest. Meaning there is always rain somewhere on the island. After the monsoon, waves roll in exhausted. But the waters are left refreshed by this second seasonal influx of nutrients. Like giant human herons, Sri Lanka's iconic stilt fishermen wait for the arrival of schools of mackerel and herring. The origins of this unusual practice are lost in myth. According to legend, after the Second World War, an inventive fisherman was finding it hard to get his own rock to fish from. Making use of scrap metal poles left by departing troops, he made his own perfect perch, much to the envy of his competitors. The practice soon caught on. Below the waves, infinite schools of big-mouth mackerel block out the sun. Jaws gaping wide. With one coordinated scoop, they filter plankton from the newly recharged water. Shoals of reef fish, yellow-striped fusiliers and damselfish mingle. Only this isn't a reef at all. Unnatural angles and perfect circles hint at past lives. Cargo ships, trawlers and world war ships litter the bottom of Sri Lanka's coast. The largest port in Sri Lanka is exposed. Strong seas and monsoon winds make these treacherous waters. But that keeps the currents circulating, and before long, shipwrecks are seized by colonists. All manner of creatures take up residence. The wrecks provide food as well as shelter. Fish feed on algae and weeds growing on the hull. It gets crowded down here. A damselfish guards her patch, crop of algae. The wreck's very own gardener, she weeds her crop. Removing unwanted algae and seaweed from her patch helps the algae she likes to grow. The faint red circle on this mast is a patch of red algae, which she can digest far more easily than other types. But it's popular with trespassers too. Living in such close proximity to other fish means some unusual ways of getting a meal and strange relationships have evolved. It's not just gardeners. There are cleaners here too. This somewhat frantic, blue-streaked wrasse is advertising for business. By swimming strangely, moving up and down and waggling his tail, he's letting passers-by know that he and his team of females are accepting clients. Yellow-striped fusiliers notice his dance. Small groups break away from the school and stop at the wrasse's cleaning station. Soon, rush on. The fusiliers get groomed, and the wrasse get a meal. Without this help, it's impossible to remove parasites, dead tissue. The male is larger than the female members of his harem, but amongst the females there is a strict hierarchy. Constant power struggles and fights are common. If the male dies, the highest-ranking female will change sex, and she takes the top job. That new life so quickly colonizes the wrecks is testament to the richness of Sri Lanka's coastal shallows. When combined with a geological quirk, this richness creates a unique coast, possibly unlike anywhere else in the world. The continental shelf is particularly narrow, and along some stretches, the deep ocean pinches in extremely close to the shore. The presence of deep water so close to land gives access to a true ocean giant. Upwellings, created by the meeting of deep cold and shallow warm water, bring plankton and nutrients up from the deep. With a double monsoon constantly pumping more nutrients out to sea, this all attracts the largest animal to have ever existed. This is one of the only places on Earth where blue whales can be found so close to shore all year round. Their tongue can weigh more than an elephant, and they can gulp down 4 tons of food in a single day. Huge, 25-meter-long, mysterious creatures, normally found voyaging the world's oceans. Emerging from the waves, they bring hitchhiking whale suckers to the surface. But these giants will not be going far. They seem to like Sri Lanka. And the waters of this island have a unique sound. For some reason, the blue whales here have a different song. They've been repeatedly recorded, making calls with 4 notes. This may be one of the few places on Earth they've made a permanent home, a tribute to the richness of these waters. It's possible Sri Lanka has its own unique subspecies, evolved to exploit this fertile territory. the existence of Sri Lanka's population of the most mighty of marine mammals has only been studied by scientists in the last couple of decades. The locals, of course, knew the giants in their waters. Some even believe the local Buddhist faith is what protected them and much of Sri Lanka's wildlife. But why they is only just starting to be understood. To sustain so many whales, Sri Lanka's coast must remain fertile and productive. Yet the fate of this sea is tied to the land and the rivers that feed it. Sri Lanka's forests are shrinking fast. Its wild herds are squeezed into an ever smaller share of the island. But ancient Sri Lanka was the
Traveling the globe, extreme fisherman ᴅᴏᴄᴜᴍᴇ risks his life to uncover freshwater beasts of legend. But are the biggest river giants still out there?
They are so extremely rare. If you want to catch a big fish, you need to suffer.
Now, Jakob's trekking into the rainforest and off the grid to battle a prehistoric predator.
She's here, I can feel it.
There's no telling who will win. Jakob?
It's risky, but I have to do it.
Or his queen of the Amazon, the massive arapaima.
Come on!
February 16th, 8 a.m. at an undisclosed airport in South America.
Okay, fishing rods.
It's day one of a 7-day expedition. Extreme angler and celebrated explorer Jakob Wagner is on a quest to fish the world's freshwater giants. A devoted conservationist, he's on a mission to raise awareness of these threatened species by finding and revealing the power and beauty of these whoppers before it's too late. Thousands of miles from his native Czech Republic, he knows time is running out. Overfishing may have wiped the Amazon's ultimate river beast, the arapaima gigas, off the planet.
What about this bag?
Jakob joins up with a local crew. To protect his rare target's hidden habitats, he keeps his final destination a secret.
This plane is quite small, but I think we can make it. Hopefully. This plane is already full, so I have to take another plane.
As an adventurer and experienced survivalist, Jakob immerses himself in the culture and environment of his target fish, often living by his wits, experience, and training.
Okay, let's go.
Jakob can only estimate where, or even if, he will meet his monster fish. The Amazon basin stretches more than 2.5 million square miles. To succeed on each leg of his mission, he'll need to go deeper and deeper into one of the most remote locations on Earth.
Once you get to the Amazon and you spend some time here, you have to love Amazon rainforest or you hate it straight away.
Jakob faces an extreme showdown of man versus super predator. Here in the world's largest river system, more than 2,000 fish species thrive, but only one incredible hunter is the biggest beast of them all. The arapaima, the largest fish in the world's largest river.
One of the coolest things about arapaima is their size.
Arapaima can grow to more than 8 feet long, weighing in at a scale-busting 400 pounds.
They are so extremely rare. Even if you see arapaima, one small one, your trip is amazing.
Meet some of freshwater's toughest living fossils. Apex killers, so well designed, these prehistoric powerhouses still rule the Amazon food chain.
Arapaima are fascinating prehistoric fish.
Like armor on a tank, large bony scales protect them from other predators. And a rapid growth rate helps them outsize all other fish in the river. Jakob has received permission to land in a remote Amazon tribal village. The tribe calls themselves simply the People. Until the 1950s, the People lived completely isolated from Western civilization. Now, to protect their indigenous culture, they invite only a few outsiders to briefly stay with them. Jakob has enlisted their help as expedition guides and crew.
Ciao. Melinka.
Jakob's transport plane also offers the community a valuable and rare opportunity for long-distance transportation.
They are very happy that we are here because they have 2 planes now. They can go with the kids to hospital and come back. So it's great.
Jakob has just 7 days to find a whopper arapaima. Under threatening skies, there's no time to waste. The gear must be unloaded quickly. A constant danger looms: rain. The sound of raindrops hitting the water can drive the fish deep below the surface, away from Jakob's baited hook. Once the Amazon rain season begins, Jakob's expedition could be doomed.
Marco?
Here, the tribal Indians call the arapaima paiche.
¿Paiche?
Paiche, mucho paiche, dice.
Okay.
Sí.
And una más, laguna aquí.
Ah, de acá arriba.
Sí.
Sí.
Claro. Claro.
Listo. Ya están listos los bolos.
¿Bolos? Sí.
Sí.
Okay.
Jakob begins a 6-hour journey, following a tributary that he hopes will lead him to a lagoon ideally suited to giant arapaima. Deep in the jungle, Jakob's looking for the shallowest water he can find. The lower the water, the better his chances of pulling these massive hunters from their lairs. Shallow water brings arapaima close to the surface, making them easier to stalk.
We are here in the end of dry season. The river is really low. This is the perfect timing for an arapaima.
But if the rains come early, water levels will rise and his strategy will fail. "90 miles downriver, Jakob arrives at his target destination.
Finally here.
An advanced team has set up the base camp with his gear and supplies. For the next few days, this will be home.
It was a long day today. We had to drive boat for many hours. And yeah, it's dark, but we have to start fishing for arapaima as soon as possible, because if we have rain, it's nearly impossible to catch arapaima because they are scared of the rain. So let's call it a day.
Early morning, expedition day 2 of 7. To find one of the Amazon's most elusive river beasts, ᴅᴏᴄᴜᴍᴇ is trekking deeper into the rainforest. In the dry season, an isolated lagoon is the holy grail of arapaima habitats. In the shallow pools, the predators spawn and hunt.
I hope I can find a lagoon over there, so this is not wasted effort.
Hunting for a lagoon isn't Jakob's only obstacle. The Amazon heat is extraordinary. 90-degree highs, 95% humidity.
Finally, a lagoon. It was a long way, but the lagoon is here, so I'm very happy about it. It looks good. It's a beautiful lagoon. Okay, let's put a canoe together.
Jakob quickly assembles the tangle of aluminum and plastic into a working fishing boat. He's had practice on many expeditions before.
Okay, now it begins. Look like a canoe.
For Jakob, lagoons are more than the perfect arapaima hunting ground.
Let's go fishing.
They're also a clue to the prehistoric predator's survival. During the dry season, water levels drop, and lagoons like this get cut off from the river. As water temperatures rise, oxygen levels decrease. Many fish species can't survive. But arapaima have adapted in an exceptional way.
What's very special about arapaima, when we are in the end of dry season, some lakes are nearly completely dry out. So other fish die, but arapaima can survive because they breathe atmospheric oxygen.
When it comes to breathing, arapaima are a double threat. In deeper water, they breathe like most fish, absorbing oxygen through blood in their gills. But in oxygen-starved shallow lagoons, lung-like tissue in their swim bladders let the predators breathe above water. Jakob watches, keeping one hook baited with a second one on standby. Every 5 to 10 minutes, arapaima surface for a gulp of air. Only then will he cast his baited hook.
I have to be ready to cast anytime because you just don't know when they go up to gulp the air.
But soon, trouble. There's fierce competition for the bait from a mob of notorious flesh eaters.
They are taking my bait. Yeah, piranhas are taking my bait, you can see it. Piranha attacked my bait. That's the biggest problem here in these lagoons because it's full of them. And when you see arapaima, you have like 5-10 seconds. You know, after the bait hit the water, then happened this.
Piranha have a fearsome reputation as killer fish that attack in packs, overwhelming prey, stripping their victims' flesh to the bone. But the piranha's mob mentality isn't due to a killer appetite. It's a defensive strategy. Swimming in groups ups the chances of spotting approaching predators and lowers a piranha's chances of getting eaten. Jakub knows the more fish he encounters, the more clues he uncovers about the complex Amazon ecosystem. To understand his target predator, the arapaima, he has to know how and where they live. Quickly changing his bait, Jakub wants to get a look at one of the biting beasts in the flesh. He confirms it. A piranha feeding frenzy is on.
Yeah. Ah, it's feeding frenzy. Piranha, yes. That's piranha. This fish has been eating my bait fish all the time. Piranha, and big one, white piranha. These lagoons are full of piranhas. It's a good fish, big one. Okay, don't eat my bait.
If these ravenous piranha keep devouring Jakub's bait fish, he'll have no chance of catching an arapaima. He must find a new lagoon. But to go deeper into the rainforest, Jakub needs the help of the Amazon's most experienced experts.
Buenos dias.
Jakub has arranged to meet two indigenous Amazon Indians, Namo and Ginto. No one on Earth knows this rainforest like they do, and Namo and Ginto have seen massive arapaima, the fish they call paiche.
Yes, buenos dias.
Aquí para paiche.
Sí.
Pescar, aquí.
Sí, pescar para paiche.
Paiche.
Blue?
No. Allá. Grande.
Sí.
Paiche, aquí.
But the clock is ticking. And as rain threatens, with less than a week to find his target, Jakub must move on, fast.
Okay, Ginto? Yeah. I have Ginto here with me. He's not fisherman, he doesn't know anything about fishing, but he's hunter and he knows the forest better than anyone else. We are carrying the canoe to the lagoon and we have a long way in front of us.
Carrying a canoe through the rainforest in oppressive heat and humidity is both a physical and navigational challenge. There's no truck, no road, not even a trail.
We have to carry the canoe overland because there is no other way how to get to the lagoon. We have to lower the canoe in the water and we have to be really quiet because I don't want to spook the fish. I can really hear arapaimas.
Jakub listens for arapaima surfacing to breathe.
Okay. I can hear them. They are here. I've seen 5 arapaimas until now, and I would say at least 2 of them are well over 200 pounds. They come up to the surface, breathe the air. I have to be ready to cast. You never know when they go up.
In these remote waters, giant arapaima are both fished and feared. Local legend says these monster fish embody the son of an Amazon chief, banished to the bottom of the river. Many here believe to this day the spirit seeks its revenge by leaping out of the water and dragging fishermen to the depths, never to be seen again. While these legends may be far-fetched, there's no denying the awesome power of these river beasts. But the biggest threat to Jakob's mission isn't the Arapaima's menacing brawn, it's human overfishing. In the dry season, lagoon-locked Arapaima are a popular catch.
Indians hunt for Arapaima by spear. That's the most common fishing technique for them. And it's easy to kill Arapaima like this because they go up and gulp the air, so they can see Arapaima on the surface, and then it's very easy to spear them.
Indigenous tribes have fished sustainably for centuries, but commercial net fishing is pushing Arapaima populations down to dangerously low levels. Losing this top predator would rob us of a precious species and disrupt the balance of an entire ecosystem. Today, the largest specimens may already be impossible to find.
They are definitely here. I've seen them, I've heard them, but so far I haven't had any luck.
Okay. After hours on this lagoon, Jakob has a chance. His only hope is if the Arapaima takes the bait before the piranha.
Come on, go!
Fighting the powerful pull, Jakob may have hooked this expedition's ultimate monster.
It's a big fish! It's a big one!
It's the battle explorer and extreme fisherman Jakob Wagner's traveled thousands of miles for. Yet even to an elite angler, the Arapaima is an awesome adversary.
She's so strong! That's a big fish. Keep on. Better. No! It's gone. That was a monster. Well over 200 pounds. But maybe I didn't set the hook well. It's difficult to say, you know. I was sitting here all day and then I get a take and... You know, I have no words.
Since he was 5 years old, fishing has been Jakob Wagner's obsession.
What I know from my father and mother, I was crazy when I saw water all the time, and even more crazy when I saw a fish in the water.
Raised in a family of professional musicians, Jakob's father expected him to follow in his footsteps. But Jakob dared to be different.
In my family, I have to say I'm kind of black sheep.
Jakob quit music school and left for Australia to become a fishing guide. 11 years later, he holds multiple world records. Known and respected worldwide for his catches and conservation efforts, Jakob has devoted his life to some of sport fishing's most immersive and extreme adventures. But now, with threatening rain and just 5 days left on his Arapaima expedition, he may face his toughest test yet.
It should be the best time for Arapaima, but when I see these clouds above me, I'm really scared because it looks like we will have some really hard rains. When you have rain, Arapaimas are scared of it. They don't go up and gulp the air. And when you have a lot of rain, the water temperature goes down and they don't want to hunt, they don't want to eat.
To wait out the storm, Jakob treks through the rainforest alone, testing his survival skills searching for food. Oilskin rain gear gives him an edge against the weather.
When we are in the middle of the Amazon rainforest, you never know what can happen. So it's good to know how to survive here, how to find water, and how to find something to eat. So let's see what we can find around here. This vine is really, really wet. It has to be full of water. Let's try to cut it here and extract some liquid to drink.
In a worst-case scenario, if Jakob became injured and stranded in the jungle, he might survive weeks without steady food. But in such extreme heat, even a day without clean drinking water is dangerous.
It tastes like tree, but it can save my life, especially in dry season. Here I found jungle avocado. Local call it wanaka. It's not easy to get it because it's far up. Okay, this is jungle avocado. We can cut it and eat it like this, but it's much better if we cook it on the fire. It gets softer. Not bad, but as I said, much better to put it on the fire.
The rain lets up. After a night's rest alone in the rainforest away from base camp, Jakob is ready to resume the hunt for a fabled prehistoric predator. Expedition day 3 of 7. After fighting packs of piranha and losing a whopper arapaima, Jakob meets up again with his local guide Ginto to press on, heading further into the jungle. Jakob continues his quest for the giant river beast's ultimate territory, the perfect shallow lagoon.
She's here, I can feel it. Sometimes you can see only small bubbles coming up.
This remote lagoon may offer better luck, but fishing for arapaima requires the vigilance of a stakeout. He needs to be careful and judicious. Jakob may only get 2 or 3 casts all day.
Arapaima fishing is more hunting. Actually, you cast on the fish, so you have to spot the fish and then you cast on it. You're not sitting on the bank and just waiting, you know, it's really hunting, it's challenging.
After more than an hour, Jakob spots an arapaima surfacing for air. More movement under the water suggests there may be several arapaima close by, and one may be a whopper.
Tres panchos, no dos, tres. Panche. It's on! Yeah! It's big fish! It's very big fish! Yeah! My rod is bent over!
Jakob gets his first real glimpse of the whopper fish. Experience tells him the catch is nearly 200 pounds.
That's a big arapaima! Wow! To have this fish on the line is something so unusual, so special, because this is one of the biggest freshwater fish on our planet. It's a big arapaima!
But there's a problem. The monster fish suddenly dives down deep, straining the line, seeking shelter beneath a fallen tree. Jakob lets out more line as fast as he can. At any moment, the fish could break free.
Yeah, she's in the tree.
And now, there's an even bigger danger. The line is tangled on a submerged tree. If the arapaima is unable to surface for air, Jakob's catch will die.
No! The fish swam into the submerged tree and the line got entangled. I have to jump in the water and free the line. Hold the rod, hold the rod, hold the rod.
Jakob takes a desperate gamble.
Okay, I go.
Diving in to free the fish could cost him his catch. Now, as extreme angler Jakob Wagner fights to free the trapped arapaima, every second could be fatal to a fish already fighting for species survival.
I got it! I got it!
Jakob has grabbed the line, but it's hopelessly stuck.
Get with the tree.
He needs to cut away the tangled fishing line, free the arapaima from the tree, and retie the line.
It's a little bit risky, but I have to do it. Okay, so now this should be fine.
Jakob must be careful to cut the right line.
Whoa! This is a big fish. Take the knife. Okay.
The arapaima is free. But in the tangle of branches underwater, the line breaks. Any chance to catch and release this ultimate river beast is lost.
The line braked. But yeah, I wasn't able to stop her. She's just too powerful. Braided line for 100 pounds. I was so close. This was a monster creature. It was fish at least close to 200 pounds. So it's the fish of your lifetime. And this is the true wild arapaima. So everybody's dreaming about this fish.
Worse yet, the noise appears to have driven away other arapaima. Now, with little more than 3 days remaining, Jakob faces a difficult decision. Stay where he is and keep trying, or use up precious fishing hours traveling further on. Back at base camp, Jakob's decision is clear. Keep going. The expedition motors downriver, on the hunt for another arapaima lagoon.
We have been driving downstream for several hours, and now I'm trying to find a new lagoon.
Jakob knows the odds of finding another giant arapaima are slim. As researchers uncover more about the freshwater giants, what was once considered one family of fish may actually be more than 4.
Scientists think that there are different species of arapaima, and that the biggest one, Arapaima gigas, could be already extinct. The chance that I will find arapaima in these lagoons is very small. This is a very remote place with no people at all, with no fishing pressure, so maybe I will be lucky and I will find one very special lagoon.
Jakob continues downriver, scanning the bank, looking for a stream that could lead to an undiscovered lagoon.
It's shallow here. Sharp left.
Finding an inlet, Jakob wants to create as little commotion as possible. He decides to go in alone, exploring it from his canoe.
I spotted a stream here, so let's hope there is a new lagoon inside.
Jakub makes his way upstream as far as he can. But without his local guide Ginto's help, he'll have to navigate the area on his own.
I paddled quite far, but it looks like it's only a stream in the forest. So I have to press on to find another lagoon.
The stream leads nowhere. But there is another discovery along the riverbank. If the arapaima is the queen of the Amazon, there's another river monster who is the king. Jakub spent his life battling the planet's biggest fish, but he's now facing an anaconda, more than twice as long as any river whopper ever measured.
Have a look at this! I just spotted an anaconda. This is the biggest snake in the Amazon and actually the biggest snake in the world.
Hidden in the tree branches, the anaconda's bulging stomach means only one thing. It's digesting a massive meal, swallowed whole.
Look at this beauty! She is huge! Ah!
Even large jungle animals like the jaguar can fall prey to anacondas this huge.
This anaconda has no problem with humans at all. Look at the body, I mean, I would easily fit inside.
Leaving behind one of the rainforest's biggest predators, Jakub cuts through the jungle on foot. Prepared for rain in his oilskin gear, he hopes to find a hidden arapaima lair. Soon, he stumbles upon a smaller, but nearly as dangerous Amazon creature.
Aside from the snakes, this is one of the most dangerous animals here in the rainforest. It's yellow scorpion, and no matter of the size, if this one stings me, I will have very, very painful 12 hours.
Another miniature menace is an ant with one of the most infamous stings on Earth.
Look at this! They call them conga, and we know it's bullet ants. Have a look at this, they are huge. And I have to be very careful because they bite like crazy, and I don't want to be bitten.
Bullet ants are known for their nasty stings, 30 times worse than a bee or wasp. Victims say it feels exactly like a bullet wound. It is also known as the 24-hour ant, because the pain from the sting is said to last 24 hours.
Come on, guy, get home.
The search for a new arapaima hunting ground has taken 2 full days. Valuable fishing time lost. Further off the grid than planned, Jakub must leave enough time for a safe return. And now, with intermittent rain, the chances of coming face to face with the Queen of the Amazon are growing slim. Expedition Day 7. The next morning, Ginto rejoins Jakub to make his final trek through the rainforest in search of the perfect arapaima lair. Discovering a hidden lagoon, Jakub silently guides his canoe onto the water. Hours pass, while Jakub listens for an arapaima surfacing for a breath of air. With a sudden motion in the water below, Jakub spots his target. As Jakub waits, the arapaima approaches his baited line. It's huge.
Incredible! She took my bait!
This may be Jakub's last chance to reel in a whopper arapaima. This time, Jakub wants to keep the monster fish from diving into the sunken trees and breaking off the line. so he must stay in the middle of the lagoon.
Stay in the middle of the lake! Stay in the middle of the lake!
His guide Ginto paddles backwards as hard as he can, but he's no match for the strength of the massive arapaima.
My rod is totally bent over.
The freshwater giant is in control, dragging the canoe around the lagoon. As the fish fights to free itself, Jakob gets his first good glimpse of his target.
She's going to jump.
He uses all his strength to hold on.
Whoa! This is massive fish. When she jumps in the air and you see this massive body, it's incredible feeling. Beautiful red color, beautiful handle. Amazing fish. Sometimes I have to ask myself, aren't you crazy? The fight is as well challenging because in the middle of the fight they can gulp the air and they get the oxygen into the body and they are fresh again. So that's why they are so hard fighters. Be careful! Be careful! That's massive fish!
This legendary fish isn't done yet. It leaps next to the canoe, nearly knocking Jakob into the lagoon.
I'm in this tiny canoe, and the canoe is as big as my fish on the line, and it can flip over any time. Do you see it?
Battling hard, explorer, conservationist, and extreme angler Jakob Wagner is caught in an intense tug-of-war with a monster arapaima. After traveling thousands of miles and trekking 6 days into the Amazon rainforest, Jakob fights to reel in the legendary freshwater leviathan.
300 pounds. This is something incredible. I have so much of adrenaline in my body, so I just don't care. I have to get a fish, you know. That's what I want. Look! Oh! It's same broad as our canoe. And be careful, be careful.
At last, the arapaima tires. But Jakob's real test has just begun. The fish is so large, Jakob must go from reeling it to wrangling it.
That's the main problem. We have to find a place where I will be able to jump on the fish, because this is the only way how I'm able to land this monster. This animal is as broad as our canoe. It's just incredible. Look at this fish!
Grabbing a fish this big and powerful is extremely dangerous. But the only way to control the thrashing animal is to corral it as close to the canoe as possible.
Okay, I hold it. I have it. Okay, now we have to go on the bank. Ginto, we are faster than you with our plan.
Keeping a tight grip, Jakob looks for a safe spot to land the massive arapaima. In the lagoon's dense vegetation, the fish could easily escape.
Yeah, we are nearly there. She's so powerful. This lagoon is just full of trees.
Jakob has no leverage, and there's no safe spot to land the fish.
Okay, stop. How deep is it here?
His catch must now become a wrestling match.
You see? I have to...
Jakob is literally in over his head as he struggles to hold on to the massive fish. His other guide, Namo, joins the struggle, having seen the commotion from the shore.
This fish is exhausted like I am. She's trying to breathe. You just saw it. And she's taking the air. She's gulping the air, the oxygen, and she's fine. And you see, we caught this fish with circle hook. The hook is in the beginning of the mouth, and that's the way how it should be. And I love you, baby.
Quinto. We just need to hold her a little bit more like this, and then we can release her. Oh. Yes, baby. This fish is really like dinosaur. It's massive. It's prehistoric creature. You see these scales? They are bigger than my eyes. It's like stone. Have a look at this tail. Now you can imagine how powerful these animals are.
Before releasing the arapaima, Jakob records the astounding measurements.
It's 10 feet and 1 inch long. Incredible fish. My biggest arapaima in my life.
The fish's stats are staggering. At 4 feet 7 inches around, weighing more than 325 pounds. It's a world record arapaima. Yet while the fish is truly colossal, giant arapaima are disappearing from the Amazon.
Let's release the fish. Thank you. See you next time. Bye-bye.
As Jakob releases the fish, he renews his dedication to raise awareness for further research and conservation, to keep the world's freshwater beasts hunting the planet for millennia to come.
Woo! Thank you. Gracias. Gracias. What an amazing expedition. It's taking me to this extremely remote lagoon. It's good to know that these beautiful animals are still alive in the wild.
Jakob has received permission to land in a remote Amazon tribal village. The tribe calls themselves simply the People. Until the 1950s, the People lived completely isolated from Western civilization. Now, to protect their indigenous culture, they invite only a few outsiders to briefly stay with them. Jakob has enlisted their help as expedition guides and crew.
Ciao. Melinka.
Jakob's transport plane also offers the community a valuable and rare opportunity for long-distance transportation.
They are very happy that we are here because they have 2 planes now. They can go with the kids to hospital and come back. So it's great.
Jakob has just 7 days to find a whopper arapaima. Under threatening skies, there's no time to waste. The gear must be unloaded quickly. A constant danger looms: rain. The sound of raindrops hitting the water can drive the fish deep below the surface, away from Jakob's baited hook. Once the Amazon rain season begins, Jakob's expedition could be doomed.
Marco?
Here, the tribal Indians call the arapaima paiche.
¿Paiche?
Paiche, mucho paiche dice.
Okay.
Sí.
And una más, laguna aquí.
Ah, de acá arriba.
Sí.
Sí.
Claro. Claro.
Listo. Ya están listos los bolos.
¿Bolos? Sí.
Sí.
Okay.
Jakob begins a 6-hour journey, following a tributary that he hopes will lead him to a lagoon ideally suited to giant arapaima. Deep in the jungle, Jakob's looking for the shallowest water he can find. The lower the water, the better his chances of pulling these massive hunters from their lairs. Shallow water brings arapaima close to the surface, making them easier to stalk.
We are here in the end of dry season. The river is really low. This is the perfect timing for an arapaima.
But if the rains come early, water levels will rise and his strategy will fail. 90 miles downriver, Jakob arrives at his target destination.
Finally here.
An advanced team has set up the base camp with his gear and supplies. For the next few days, this will be home.
It was a long day today. We had to drive boat for many hours. And yeah, it's dark, but we have to start fishing for our palma as soon as possible, because if we have rain, it's nearly impossible to catch our palma because they are scared of the rain. So let's call it a day.
Early morning, expedition day 2 of 7. To find one of the Amazon's most elusive river beasts, Jakob Wagner is trekking deeper into the rainforest. In the dry season, an isolated lagoon is the holy grail of arapaima habitats. In the shallow pools, the predators spawn and hunt.
I hope I can find a lagoon over there, so this is not wasted.
Traveling the globe, extreme fisherman Jakob Wagner risks his life to uncover freshwater beasts of legend. But are the biggest river giants still out there?
They are so extremely rare. If you want to catch a big fish, you need to suffer.
Now, Jakob's trekking into the rainforest and off the grid to battle a prehistoric predator.
She's here, I can feel it.
There's no telling who will win. Jakob?
It's risky, but I have to do it.
Or his queen of the Amazon, the massive arapaima.
Come on!
February 16th, 8 a.m. at an undisclosed airport in South America.
Okay, fishing rods.
It's day 1 of a 7-day expedition. Extreme angler and celebrated explorer Jakob Wagner is on a quest to fish the world's freshwater giants. A devoted conservationist, he's on a mission to raise awareness of these threatened species by finding and revealing the power and beauty of these whoppers before it's too late. Thousands of miles from his native Czech Republic, he knows time is running out. Overfishing may have wiped the Amazon's ultimate river beast, the arapaima gigas, off the planet.
What about this bag?
Jakob joins up with a local crew. To protect his rare target's hidden habitats, he keeps his final destination a secret.
This plane is quite small, but I think we can make it. Hopefully. This plane is already full, so I have to take another plane.
As an adventurer and experienced survivalist, Jakob immerses himself in the culture and environment of his target fish, often living by his wits, experience, and training.
Okay, let's go.
Jakob can only estimate where, or even if, he will meet his monster fish. The Amazon basin stretches more than 2.5 million square miles. To succeed on each leg of his mission, he'll need to go deeper and deeper into one of the most remote locations on Earth.
Once you get to the Amazon and you spend some time here, you have to love Amazon rainforest or you hate it straight away.
Jakob faces an extreme showdown of man versus super predator. Here in the world's largest river system, more than 2,000 fish species thrive, but only one incredible hunter is the biggest beast of them all. The arapaima, the largest fish in the world's largest river.
One of the coolest things about arapaima is their size.
Arapaima can grow to more than 8 feet long, weighing in at a scale-busting 400 pounds.
They are so extremely rare. Even if you see arapaima, one small one, your trip is amazing.
Meet some of freshwater's toughest living fossils. Apex killers, so well designed, these prehistoric powerhouses still rule the Amazon food chain.
Arapaima are fascinating prehistoric fish.
Like armor on a tank, large bony scales protect them from other predators. And a rapid growth rate helps them outsize all other fish in the river.
The effort.
Hunting for a lagoon isn't Jakob's only obstacle. The Amazon heat is extraordinary. 90-degree highs, 95% humidity.
Finally, a lagoon.
It was a long way, but the lagoon is here, so I'm very happy about it. It looks good. It's a beautiful lagoon. Okay, let's put a canoe together.
Jakob quickly assembles the tangle of aluminum and plastic into a working fishing boat. He's had practice on many expeditions before.
Okay, now it begins. Look like a canoe.
For Jakob, lagoons are more than the perfect arapaima hunting ground.
Let's go fishing.
They're also a clue to the prehistoric predator's survival. During the dry season, water levels drop, and lagoons like this get cut off from the river. As water temperatures rise, oxygen levels decrease. Many fish species can't survive. But arapaima have adapted in an exceptional way.
What's very special about arapaima, when we are in the end of dry season, some lakes are nearly completely dry out, so other fish die, but arapaima can survive because they breathe atmospheric oxygen.
When it comes to breathing, arapaima are a double threat. In deeper water, they breathe like most fish, absorbing oxygen through blood in their gills.
Whatever you do, don't fall asleep.
Nightmare on Elm Street is a bona fide classic in the same pantheon as The Exorcist, Psycho, and Night of the Living Dead.
Freddy certainly was a star, kind of the father figure who takes delight in killing innocents and delights in evil.
He became a character in American horror, the equal of Frankenstein and Dracula.
Just seemed like ancient tragedy in a way, so it felt very classical.
It was about the story, and it was a really, really good story.
This is a smart, interesting little movie. It deals with reality and fantasy blending.
It was one of my very first jobs at all. I didn't really know what I was getting myself into.
The scene in the bedroom where the girl is going up the wall.
Nobody's ever really done that kind of thing before.
No apologies, nothing politically correct about it. Pushing the envelope, Wes Craven, come on down.
Gonna get you.
When I try to think of where becoming a horror film director came from, I can only speculate. First of all, I never thought of making movies until I was almost 30. I was raised in a fundamentalist Baptist church. Almost all social things of any import were really within the church. And one of the beliefs they had, besides you can't play cards and dance and smoke and drink alcohol, was that you don't go to movies because they're kind of the devil's playground. My father was buried in 45, somewhere around my 6th birthday. The few memories that I have of my father, I was really scared of him. He had an explosive temper, and you had the feeling like he could kill you at any time. It was just, one of those kind of guys. My first year in college, I came down with this very strange, unexpected paralysis. And during that time, when I came fairly close to death, I started writing poetry. That and my love of books and novels started going into writing short stories and things like that, but none of them were, about horror. Films didn't really happen until I started teaching college. We had an art theater that showed all the European films, fantastic Bergman and Fellini films, this amazing sort of fluorescence of astonishing films. That was my notion, is I want to do something like that. Quit my job. I just went to New York to figure out how to make films. The whole idea of doing a horror film never would have occurred to me. Really, it just was a matter of my having been working for this guy, Sean Cunningham, who hired me to do some syncing up dailies.
Around 1970 is when I first started to make films. I really didn't know how, and I was learning how to make all of these mistakes and how to make movies. In the middle of all of that, I meet this guy named Wes Craven. He was a rock. I mean, he was a terrific assistant, and he became a really good editor. After we had worked together for almost a year, it was like, I've got an idea, let's make a movie. We were able to get some people to put up money because of our previous relationship.
Sean said, the backers want a scary movie. Did you ever think of writing something scary? I said, no. He said, well, go write something scary, and if they like it, you can direct it. On a weekend, in 3 days, I wrote Last House on the Left. Kind of a raucous, balls-to-the-walls, escape criminals doing horrible things movie.
The picture turned out to be very, very strong. You got to see Wes's special sensitivity for this scary, dark arena.
I don't think Sean or I thought that anybody would really see it. When it opened, it kind of created a sensation, and there were riots and protests, and people tried to get into the projection booth to destroy it. I felt like, hey, maybe we got something here.
After Last House was released, Wes felt that he had his sample reel and had a kind of a hit movie.
Actually, after Last House, I didn't make another film for, I think, almost 5 years because I was trying to do other kinds of films. And then at a certain point, my friend said, I can get you money to make a scary movie, write something else scary. That became Hills of Eyes.
The Hills Have Eyes, another sort of strange, stark, semi-horror thing which he was able to get done. And at the same time, Wes had moved to California, was trying to make his career here and got to do a couple of movies. Wes became a successful director, but he's still haunted by this idea of going back and trying to do this special movie.
Nightmare was written after I'd done 2 films back to back. I had made enough money on them to take 6 months off. So I basically took 6 months off and wrote and refined the script, Nightmare on Elm Street. Nightmare on Elm Street as a story seems to have its roots in these articles in the Los Angeles Times. The first article was about a young man, Asian descent, dying in the middle of a nightmare. He and the family had come out of relocation camps in Southeast Asia during the time of Pol Pot, when hundreds of thousands of people were just being slaughtered. About a year later, there was a second article. Then about 6 months later, the third, and the third one just got me. That was a young man whose father was a doctor. They had come out of relocation camps. He was having nightmares, and he was telling his family that there's something after me, and I'm afraid if I don't stay awake, it'll kill me. This kid decided he was going to stay awake. Sleeping pills the father had been demanding that he take were found under his pillow. He hadn't taken any of them. And he had a coffee pot in his closet full of black coffee with a long extension cord that he had hidden behind curtains. They were all sitting in the living room watching a movie, and he just kind of fell asleep. Carried him upstairs, put him to bed, pulled the covers over him, and everyone goes, thank God. Everybody goes to bed in the middle of the night. They hear screaming. They run into his room, and before they get to him, he is dead. Oh man, I got to do a movie about that.
There are so many horror films that have used the dream motif. If we go back to The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari, the entire film is seen as a nightmare. They chose to make the sets distorted, expressionistic, nightmarish. But there was never a situation where a character lived exclusively in a dream world.
Since I was in college, I've been writing down dreams and remembering my dreams, so I was kind of familiar with the whole landscape. I've always felt like nightmares are the horror movies of the psyche. Conversely, horror films are kind of the nightmares of a culture. They talk about the things that our normal, rational mind or our polite society doesn't really want to bring to the dinner table. I was trying with Nightmare on Elm Street to think in archetypes. It was very much built on a system of kind of archetypical thinking and nightmares.
It was right in there that Wes started to talk to me about this character that operated in dreams and was able to cross over into real life.
Right away, I thought, you have to have an antagonist. You have to have the killer. And then it was a matter of just kind of designing him. By that time, Halloween had come out and Friday the 13th had come out, and they both were very powerful and successful films, and they had somebody in a mask. At a certain point, I thought, kill him in fire, and then he can have a mask of just scar tissue, and yet he'll be able to be articulate.
Fred Krueger, Mom! Fred Krueger!
Freddy, the name, was the name of a kid who used to beat me up quite frequently.
Where are you, Krueger?
Krueger sounded very German and reminded me of one of the big war plants in Nazi Germany, and also it was an extension of Krug, who was the lead character in Last House on the Left. Freddy's hat was exactly the hat of a man who had scared me when I was a little kid, who I think was a drunk walking down the street. He just somehow knew I was there, and he stopped and he looked right at me and just held that. It just scared the shit out of me. His sweater colors were out of an article I read in Scientific American that these two colors were the most difficult for the human cornea or human eye to put side by side. The claws were the sort of pièce de résistance, and it was like, well, what does he have? Does he have a knife? Does he have a sickle? I think at that time we had a cat, and I just saw the cat doing this. You know, I was like, oh, yeah, right.
You want to know who Fred Krueger was? He was a filthy child murderer who killed at least 20 kids in the neighborhood.
The worst crime imaginable to me is to harm a child. The fact that he was a child murderer and a child molester was just about the most loathsome creature I could imagine on the level of what he did. The big problem was, how do you fight somebody like that? It became a matter of having a central character, Nancy, that dared to go into the nightmares, go into his territory. That's when I started poking around lucid dreaming and that concept that you can go into a dream and be awake. And I just invented this little conceit that if you were holding something when you woke up, it would come with you back into your reality.
I brought something out from my tree.
I would tell it in about a minute, and people would go, oh, I'd go see that in a second.
In the early 80s, I think Wes had his first draft of the script, and the agent had shopped it around. Most people just said, I don't know if it'll work. I just don't you have anything else? The only person that believed in it was Bob Shea. Bob was running New Line Pictures, which I think at the time was a 16mm distribution company.
At that time, Bob Shea and New Line Cinema were a tiny little, almost a storefront in lower Manhattan. That wasn't who I wanted to, make the movie for 10 cents, so it went around to Hollywood too, but nobody got it except Bob.
I said I thought that sounded fantastic because it had an element that I'm always looking for, which is something that all audiences can relate to, and everybody, of course, could relate to scary dreams and nightmares.
Bob absolutely believed that Wes was onto something, and he wanted a shot at the big time. The bad news is Bob didn't have any money. He spent months and months, if not years, trying to get the money together to shoot this movie.
With great pain and suffering, I will tell you that. As much the pain and suffering you go through making a film is nowhere near the pain and suffering you go through financing it. In this case, I had to raise all the money outside.
He raised the money basically, I'm sure, from his own money, and I'm sure from friends and family. And then he was looking for the major investor. Smart Egg was going to advance him $1 million for the picture. A week later, he called me and said they dropped out.
Just about 2 weeks before we started shooting, he basically said, you guys should all just go home and I'll call you if I find money. And it was like, oh man, so close,
Bob told me, go back to LA and tell everyone that they're going to have to just work for free for a while. John Burroughs, our line producer, put up his own money.
I'll use my credit card and I'll pay the crew. It was like $8,000 or $9,000.
Remember at that time, Bob has a thing about fingernails and kind of digging at them, and I looked over and they were all just bloody, and I realized the incredible amount of stress that comes from raising money and trying to get back into a picture. Somehow he found the money.
We had one final meeting with Media Home Entertainment, a guy named Joe Wolf who owned that company, and they were big home video distributors. Finally made a deal where Joe Wolf could take over the whole movie if I didn't get my commitment together in 3 or 4 weeks. I managed to then go to the Smart Egg guy and browbeat him into agreeing to put up the last few $100,000.
Bob didn't like it, but he had to take it. He was stuck. We went ahead and made the picture, but Bob will always remember that he was really giving his blood. You know, he said, "John, I hate it, I hate it, I hate it." The casting director was Annette Benson. She started bringing in people for Wes to talk to.
You know, you make a lot of decisions when you start off on a film in casting that you're going to be married to, and if you make one wrong decision, it can just kill the film. Nancy was played by this young woman who walked into the casting office, Heather Langenkamp. There was just nothing pretentious about her, but she was smart. She had an open face. She had a strong face.
I remember the interview really well because it was the scene where I'm describing how my dream had this guy in it with fingernails, and I remember, you know, making that sound.
Nancy.
I remember looking at Wes, and I could tell he really liked it.
He knew immediately that Heather was the right look because he wanted a young girl who was smart looking, obviously pretty, vulnerable, but clearly had a good head on her shoulders.
I'm into survival.
The character that I love the most and have identified with the most is Nancy Thompson. She had a great sense that she could solve problems without anybody's help at all. I try to be like her, actually. Nancy definitely was this good girl, and her best friend, Tina, you get the feeling like she just isn't going to make it.
When Wes cast me as Tina, I just completed my acting program. My agents at the time called and said, "You have an audition for this horror film." The thought behind it was that I'd be the sort of Janet Leigh character, and in the first couple scenes of the film you would think that I was going to be the heroine.
That was obviously his lead. It was going to be his heroine. You found out a lot about her, and then you killed her.
The device shown just to make it clear that I'm not going to be the heroine. Obviously, when I die, that's a clear indicator.
Rob was played by Nick Corey.
Guys can have nightmares too, you know.
He was a very interesting actor. He had a lot of soul, I thought, and a lot of empathy.
I probably could have saved if I'd have moved sooner.
He felt like he could play a character who wasn't a bad guy, but he hadn't had the breaks that everybody else had had.
Johnny Depp had never acted, and Wes liked him and liked his look.
Hi, how you doing?
It came down to 3 guys. Johnny Depp was one, and there was just a name. I said, well, I'm thinking of this guy, which is not Johnny, and my daughter and her friend said, "Dad, Johnny Depp." Oh, he's sexy. He's so sexy. He's a dreamboat.
Sexy and hot and good looking.
His was a little bit more of a goody two-shoes character than I'm sure he was in real life. You know, he played such a pure as the driven snow kind of guy.
Why would anybody want to kill me?
Johnny had never been, to my knowledge, in front of a camera before.
I won't screw up.
He was just terrified that he wasn't doing a good job. You know, after we were shooting him, I said, "Johnny, you're doing great."
One of the conditions when we got the rest of our money was that we needed to have a name, at least a name or two, so that we could sell the picture foreign. We were so excited by the fact that John Saxon was willing to do it. John Saxon came on board, and he was quite a name at that time.
He was a very well-known actor, and he had been part of the Hollywood studio system before it was disbanded in the 60s.
He was a heartthrob when I was growing up in Caldwell, Idaho. He was the kind of actor that girls sent away for the 8x10 glossy.
How you doing, baby?
He played my dad perfectly, and I felt very secure at all times when I was around him and acting with him.
Ronnie Blakely played Nancy's mother.
Are you okay?
She had been in Nashville, the Robert Altman film.
Fred Krueger can't come after you, Nancy. He's dead.
Ronnie Blakely, she had an incredible life. She'd hung out with Bob Dylan, and she had been nominated for an Academy Award.
When I met Wes Craven, I was somewhat surprised to see that he was such an elegant, soft-spoken man. It was a thrill to work with him, and he couldn't have been nicer.
Are you okay?
I'm okay. I felt very close and friendly with Heather and admired her a great deal, so we hit it off very well.
We actually did spend a day or two together before the shoot where we went out and shopped for prom dresses at the Galleria, pretending that she was my mom at the mall. I loved this scene in the kitchen where she's treating me like I am crazy. She slaps me. Ronnie really slapped me. We both were very buried in that scene.
The casting of Freddie was a really big deal. I mean, it would rise and fall on Freddie. My first thought was that because of the physicality of the role, I should go with somebody who was like a stuntman. It was very quickly apparent that they were not in connection with that part of their psyche at all. And then in comes Robert Englund.
I think I'd done maybe 12 movies before I did Nightmare on Elm Street, but what happened to me was I finally stepped into television. I did this miniseries called V, which was sort of breakout for me. That was sort of my first taste of celebrity. In my hiatus from that, that's when I auditioned for Nightmare on Elm Street. My buddy smoked, and he'd ridden over with me, and I'd used some ash from the ashtray in my car, which is an old makeup theater trick, and put a little bit of circles under my eyes. It looks very, very real. You can fool people with it. I just sat there and stared back at Wes.
Wes came out of the meeting and Robert had left, and he told me, he said, you know, he said, this man can do this.
He was just full of piss and vinegar, and he just loved the role. He said, I just can't wait to sink my teeth into this.
When Wes started shooting Nightmare, there was enormous pressure on him because he had believed in it for so long, and now it was sort of like put up or shut up. And he was working with an insufficient budget and a very short shooting schedule, trying to figure out how to do it.
I think we had something like 32 days. It was tight. It was very, very tight. You know, as a director, you just never know whether you can cram all of that, 10 pounds of stuff into a 5-pound bag.
It was a small budget movie that pretended to be a big budget movie with multi-units. We did not have a lot of time for what we had to do.
But we found very talented people who were willing to work for the money we had and were able to take a few $1,000s and turn it into a bed spurting blood or something like that.
Cinematographer was Jacques Haken, an absolute perfectionist. He wore an eye patch when he was shooting, and when we asked him why he did that, he said, because I don't want to close my eye, but I don't want any distraction, so the eye that was not to the lens had an eye patch.
He was one of these cameramen that in the screening room when we ran the dailies, he'd run up to the screen from his seat. Oh my God, look at the lighting over here in this corner. But his work was good. His work was beautiful. Wes had dreamt up all kinds of weird things, and he would get together with Haken. He and Wes were working very tightly together to get what they wanted.
We do plan shots. There's a lot of storyboarding involved, and it's very premeditated. But you still have to leave room open for free thinking. You see a hand and your eye is drawn to it. There's your close-up of the glove. And watch Robert Englund, sort of flip out in that makeup and go, where's the heat? And make sure we get that on the film.
The shooting was done at Desilu Studios, what used to be the old Desilu that some independent equipment house had purchased.
We rented the space and we actually built the whole house on the stage, first and second floor. Then we shot in West Hollywood.
There's a wonderful little street called Genesee that when you pull onto it, it's like you're in the Midwest. It just has beautiful overarching trees. So that was our exterior location.
It's a very noticeable house. I do remember it really vividly. A lot of the scenes at that front door and the rose bushes and the trellis, I do hope those people forgave us for anything that we broke.
The neighborhood was very upset at us. There weren't too many films going around on the streets in those days. Then they became interested in the picture when they saw us shooting at night and when Freddie was out walking around. Oh, look at him, there he is, there he is. I told you, what a gruesome. And so we were starting to get crowds coming around.
And then we shot in Venice, California, some of the back alley stuff.
I've often thought, I wonder what all those neighbors thought in the middle of the night, because I was screaming at the top of my lungs running down this alley.
The boiler room was a power plant of the Lincoln Heights jail. We went down and looked at the basement, and it was just perfect.
We looked at a lot of boiler rooms, and most of them were very clean and kind of, contemporary, and I wanted something very dungeon-like. And this one just fit the bill.
It was just creepy. I mean, it was clearly a place filled with so much anguished emotion. God only knows what happened in there.
All the pipes had been wrapped in this insulation and it was all broken open and this stuff was falling out. A year later, we discovered that the place had been closed down because it was just full of asbestos, and I realized we were all in there sucking up asbestos for like a week.
It's guerrilla filmmaking. One had to really be prepared and stay immersed in what you were doing because the whole movie is special effects.
I just kind of assumed that that's the way movies were made in Hollywood, you know? Only lately when I see like how the A-list stars are treated, I'm like, wow, that was really low budget, wasn't it? But I had nothing to compare it to, so I was perfectly happy. We laughed a lot on the set.
You know, in a horror movie, there's so many ludicrous things going on with the stage blood and the makeup and the melodramatic style of acting sometimes that you really have to embrace because everything around you is larger than life. You kind of got to giggle, and Wes certainly knows that and encourages a little bit of that so then you can get down to business.
Freddy's makeup, of course. Wes Craven, he gave me the original script and basically gave me a little description of what he thought Freddy should look like. I did 5 different sculptures of what I thought Freddy should look like based on burn makeups. You know, I did a lot of research. Wes kind of mixed and matched different things on each sculpture, and then we came up with a final look. When I first showed Robert, he was just excited. It was going to be a lot of fun to play this character.
I thought, the makeup is so extensive that I need some humanity, and my eyes, my darting little beady eyes, will be the humanity.
It took 3 hours. I think it was about 11 different pieces we had to glue down, because I had under pieces that glued down that showed the muscle, and then over that I put melted flesh kind of pieces, and I wanted it to move independently so you'd see his muscles moving underneath. When he first got into it, it was almost like he was afraid to move around, like it was gonna fall off or something. And he goes, "This is amazing. It all holds together and it moves." And he started moving his mouth around and moving his eyebrows, and he was just all excited after that.
I remember the first time I saw Robert Englund wearing his Freddy makeup. It was so strange.
I did not know what special effects makeup could do to a person.
It was just so gruesome and so like shiny and oozy.
He couldn't get out of it once he was in it. So, for example, if we ate lunch, there Freddy would be having lunch, which isn't exactly what you want to see across the lunch table.
It got very difficult for Robert towards the end because his face was nearly raw from all the makeup. It got to the point where at the end of the day, he wouldn't even wait for me to come and take it off carefully with solvents and things. He would just rip the whole mask off.
This is God.
The famous glove, Freddy Krueger's glove. The original description in the script was fairly loose. Wes had a vision sort of in his mind of what it could do, but not how it was. He made the suggestion that it needs to be something that the guy could make himself with the things that you find in a boiler room. I did a sketch, a side view sketch of what the whole thing would look like, just to work out the geometry, how's this thing going to move, where the rivets need to be, how does it attach to the glove. And then I handed the work off to Lou Carlucci and Charlie Bellardinelli, who were 2 of my guys, to actually build the glove itself. We wanted to use a commercially available knife. This little Echo steak knife was the most brutal looking thing. Reground, remounted on the glove to make those long talons. I remember the first time Robert tried the glove on. First thing he did was cut himself, like everybody did, because we didn't realize that if you folded your fingers all the way, the knives went into your wrist. But then he sort of looked at Wes and got that smile on his face and went, that became his look with the glove.
Gonna get you. I really began to play with it. You know, and that would be what happened to me. I remember playing around in craft service and goofing in craft service with it, you know, putting different, you know, jujubes and marshmallows and putting jelly on it, making it look like guts and stuff like that. That's when I really got comfortable with it and really began to really get it into the frame.
It's got to be the scariest looking thing. It just looks so homemade. It looked like something that some psychopath would have made. They had several different ones. They had sharp ones and plastic ones and non-sharp ones. And whenever Freddy would grab me, I'd say, "This is the not sharp one, right?" You know. And often they would forgotten to switch him out. He's like, "Oh no, this is the sharp one." Yeah, it caused us a lot of nightmares.
It was very strange to see Robert interact with people. He went from being this nice guy and real talkative and everything, and then all of a sudden you'd hear action. You just see this whole dark cloud come over.
Hey, marker.
Once he put it all on, he sort of got into the character. He enjoyed playing that part. He relished it.
Tina, watch this.
I could tell that there was a really strong actor playing the role. There was something there that was going to be a real-life breathing character.
Robert Englund was a classically trained actor at the Royal Academy. He really brought this character to life as if he was playing a Shakespearean role. He would practice movements that would be extremely dramatic. There's so much drama to every single line that he delivered.
What I took was Klaus Kinski. I was really impressed with his Nosferatu, and I took the thrusted neck that Klaus did on that. And then the other one was, there was a certain kind of, a you dirty rat kind of swagger that Jimmy Cagney had that I wanted to bring to Freddy. Sometimes even walking crossover like a surfer walks on a surfboard or like a runway model. It gives Freddy a kind of a glide. I remember seeing there once, and Johnny and Heather were sitting there getting makeup on as if they needed it, these two beautiful young kids. And here I am, and I'm getting basted with a turkey baster full of KY jelly. I envied them. I envied them their youth. I envied their beauty. A light bulb went off. I could use this as Freddy. It was a shorthand for me to get angry. I'm gonna split you in two. This was a guy that knows what's in your underwear drawer. This is a guy that knows what you're afraid of. This is a guy who knows what's in your diary. This is a guy that knows your weakness and can exploit that, and that's a real violation.
Look, all better for me, but not for you.
Wes Craven had a tremendous mind for effects. He was so good. I could sit there and he'd tell me what he's going to do, and I'd say, well, we can't shoot that, Wes. We can't. Jim Doyle was our effects man. When Wes would talk to him, he'd understand.
Nightmare was a low budget movie for what they were attempting to do especially. I think we had 80 effect shots in a 90-minute film. Wes, being an experienced low-budget director at that point, was able to use the budget to his advantage.
My feeling about special effects were twofold. One, I wasn't terribly expert in it. And two, I couldn't afford them anyway. So everything was pretty much practical, which is a film term for just done physically.
We worked our way through ideas for some of these nightmares that would give him the bang on the screen.
Every scene has some really innovative effect in it. Wes was always the instigator. Any idea would be great. Okay, how are we going to make that today? The very first one was in the alleyway when Freddy's arms stretch across the alley. The idea seemed so simple, and yet the effect was so bizarre. It was just something that you weren't expecting at all.
Oh, the alley scene, yes, that was very high-tech. His arms stretching out were literally a guy on two garage roofs, one on each side of the alley, with a fishpole.
They were air-assisted to be able to extend, and then they were just marionetted from two guys with fishing pole rigs, one in each garage on each side. That's as complicated as that had to be.
Freddy's face getting pulled off, that was a puppet. I had to build a whole puppet of Robert, head and torso. I had to put his face on, but I couldn't glue it down because it had to smear off like really easy. So I just used KY jelly and just loaded it in there on the skull face.
I think it was one take, just... Much of that stuff was just very, very, very simply done.
Simple one was he wanted to have a figure pressing against the wall then showing the whole figure of the man. I said, how are we going to shoot that?
That scene, they literally, I remember at 8 in the morning, they're like, how are we going to do this? And Jim Doyle's like, well, I really think we should just go out and buy this new material. It's called spandex.
Yeah, the rubber wall that everybody thinks is rubber. I went off down the fabric store and got spandex. So then we just made a panel of it, stuck it over the bed, and pushed on it a couple times, and it was like, this might work. That would be me. That would be my face, is Freddy in that particular shot.
Nancy stirs.
I think that's my hero shot.
Freddy's got to come back. We didn't know what it would look like. I just said, just press your face against it and press your hand out. And we'll see how it looks. And we looked at it like, whoa, that's really terrific. But, it cost 10 cents.
Of course, the bathtub scene, which is probably people's favorite scene, just that idea of the claw coming up through the water between my legs while I'm sleeping in the bathtub. How are we going to do this? well, you're going to be on this little box in the bathtub, and then we're going to have Jim Doyle from underneath who's going to, stick the claw up through the bathwater bubbles. I'm like, okay, you guys have obviously thought about this more than I have.
It wasn't a difficult thing to do. We just cut a hole under the bathtub, cut a hole in the bathtub, sealed a tank below. And action. As I just held my breath and just would, duck under the water when Wes said action, and I could hear him because he was right next to the wall, so I could hear him through the wall. And I just took cues from him.
Right, too high.
And had to be really, really, really careful because that was the sharp glove.
And up.
I loathe to admit that's not me between Heather's legs in the tub. I'm just Jim Doyle again, working 24/7.
No, get up, Jim.
Ready. Okay, Jim, ready? Take your breath.
Are you ready? As soon as he's under, I'll start. Yell action, I guess.
As soon as you're ready, Jim. Action.
Underwater. That was all done at a pool with black plastic sheeting so that you couldn't tell how deep the pool was. It looked like it went forever down there.
We all went under that Viz Queen on scuba equipment. We all thought we were going to drown. We all just thought this is the most dangerous thing we've ever done.
There's some props that the special effects guys bring onto the set. I think Wes invents these kinds of things to just get me. I have to get over that, and it usually takes me a couple of minutes.
I was in the lab one day putting the phone together with the mouth and the mechanical tongue. It was a cable-operated tongue device, so he could make it go up or down, left and right, and pull it in and out.
It was just like a simple prop, and all it did was just that.
Then when I saw how it worked, and I saw the line that was going to be read, I knew that would become one of the most famous lines from the movie. It just had all the ingredients of being one of those great movie lines.
The thing I walked away the most from the entire film was that I felt that it was a film about blood. No! It was like every scene was too much blood, not enough blood, the blood's not red enough, the blood's too sticky, the blood's too thin, cue the blood, more blood, less blood, splash the blood. I clearly had read it and interestingly enough, not really processed some of the more adventurous things I was going to have to do. One day on the set, a prop guy came up to me and was like, oh, now, just wanted to show you the body bag. And I'm like, all right, like, why you're showing me? That was awful, being in that body bag. Your psyche does not want to be in that bag. You hear about body bags, you're just not supposed to be in one. Also because I was sharing it with creatures. I had to stand in this bag with these things. It was just awful. I was terrified and grossed out, and I thought, this is just awful. Centipede? Wait, I don't remember reading that in the script. They shot with my face with a rubber centipede, me pushing it out, and then they used the cast face with a real centipede. I don't know what this has to do with acting. I don't think I want to do this.
The biggest thing in the picture was the revolving room.
The upside-down room that they used with Tina, who was shown to be on the ceiling. I had no idea how they were going to do that when I saw the script. I'm still not absolutely clear how they did do it on production.
It was critical that Tina's death had to be something that was completely otherworldly and completely confusing to the audience. The idea actually came from the Fred Astaire film Royal Wedding, which had a great sequence of him dancing around the rotating room. You can do that? I said, well, I think we can. So I went ahead and looked at the logistics. So, yeah, I think we can do this. We spent a month to get this thing done. Built the framework and then built the room inside of that.
All sorts of superstructure underneath because it had to kind of have a structural integrity no matter what attitude it was in.
Floors, walls, ceiling, everything is framed in 2x6s and double layer plywood because nothing can move. Every little thing had to be reconsidered. What are the decorations in the room? How are we going to nail them down when the room turns?
Everything in the room, all the curtains, anything that would flop or move was just starched to hell or pinned down. We strapped Amanda's boyfriend down to the floor. We had his hair totally lacquered. And then there were two kind of jump seats that were bolted to the wall, and the camera was bolted to the wall.
The cameraman had himself strapped into a chair, and he kept the camera on and he went around with the room.
We turned the room by hand, me and 3 or 4 guys. It was very spooky when it was turning all by itself.
It was horrifying. I mean, it was the only scene I think I've ever been part of that was more frightening in real life. What if it falls off its hinges? Or what if somebody falls out of the hole and lands on the ground? It just seemed like so much could go wrong.
I was pretty scared going into that. I was afraid for my own physical safety because I kept thinking things were going to fall on me. I thought I was going to fall out. This has a lot of elements to it that seem really dangerous.
We shot the whole sequence and just dragged Amanda up the wall. It just was the spookiest thing in the world. The only thing was, as soon as anybody walked into the room, they got totally nauseous because it was so disorienting.
I look up and there's the bed above me. Completely freak out. I get complete and utter vertigo and I start to feel that I'm falling. Wes's head comes through this hole in the floor and he's like, look, I am standing on the floor. This is my head. You're on the floor. You're looking right at me.
Amanda, this is down, this is up, this is down, this is up, just before the take.
And action.
Just the most bizarre thing I've ever been asked to do. It was a mess doing the whole thing.
And then we took the same room and used it as Johnny Depp's room for the bed sequence. The part pulling him down through the bed was easy, but then when the mother comes in and sees all the blood come out, we inverted the room.
It's actually inspired by Kubrick a little bit, because The Shining had come out, and there was that scene with the blood spilling out of the elevators.
I thought if you could get away with it, I could.
Roughly 220 gallons of the blood, as we called it. This was actually made with water, with food coloring and a little bit of poster paint to make it thick. It was stored on a scaffolding above the stage.
Imagine it's like a lottery drum. There's a platform with guys waiting at the top. The drum turns, and when it hits the mark, boom, and that's the bed.
Nobody could see anything because the room was all closed. All we could hear was this thunderous pounding on the floor, which was now the ceiling, of all this blood dumping into the room. It was probably about 30 of the most exciting seconds I've had on a film set.
The stunt coordinator was Tony Caesar. He did some really hard falls. There's a scene where Freddy gets knocked by the sledgehammer and falls backward over the railing. I thought he had broken his neck for sure because his body rotated and he just turned his head sideways for a split second and hit that thing like a ton of bricks. The whole plywood, which was like 3/4 inch plywood, was cracked.
His specialty was burn scenes, where he would paint his body with filament and light himself.
This guy was supposedly one of the top body burn guys in the business. This guy's nuts. He's good. He knows what he's doing.
He did what he said was the longest fire burn done to that time when Freddy was caught on fire in the basement, runs up the stairs.
I couldn't believe this guy was actually doing this. It's nuts. We're sitting there with the fire extinguishers. When is he going to stop? He rolls back down the stairs on fire. Nobody'd ever done that before. Gets up, starts back up the stairs. And we're like, okay. Finally, he went down, hot enough, and we put him out.
They put him out and he stood up and said, how'd it go? So he was pretty amazing.
At the end, as we were finally winding down, and I'm sure the money was running out, there were some days where there were some extra people on the set kind of looking at us, and I got the sense like, okay, these must be money people, and they must be nervous that we're not done yet.
In the middle of all of this, I was talking to Wes and asking him how it was going, and he was telling me about the shortage of time and money and so on, and I volunteered to come in and try to shoot second unit to pick up shots, and I said, look, just tell me what you need, and I'll go try to get the shots. You'd work for 12 or 14 or 15 hours, and you wouldn't get everything that was on the call sheet.
My day-to-day concerns were keeping people working. We had growing discontent with the crew because we were falling behind.
I asked Bob, what do I do? I've never produced before. I've never represented a studio on a production. Bob said, just keep pacing back and forth, looking at your watch, and sign.
One day, we were doing an inside scene where I was running through the alley and I'm being pursued by Freddy. Cut my foot open. And I remember Bob Shea going like, do you really have to go to the hospital and get stitches? I'm like, I think I do. Oh, this actress, God. So what? Her foot is bleeding a little bit.
The scene where Heather puts her foot in the carpet and it sinks through. That was one of my dreams, one of the horrible dreams that I had had when I was a kid.
Wes said, okay, Bob, this is your idea. If you think it's so great, why don't you direct this scene?
Yeah, well, no, it was one of the times that Bob visited the set, and it was towards the end, very, very end of the shoot, and I think it was about the time he was getting ready to pull the plug. Bob was standing right behind me saying, you got to shoot, you can't do that, cut this scene. I said, Bob, why don't you direct it?
Wes deigned to let me do it, mostly because if somebody didn't do it, it wouldn't have happened, and I thought it was an important part in the movie. The ending of the film was a huge conundrum. Wes wanted Heather to come out of the house, turn to her mother and say, well, God, I had this very strange dream last night, and then go off to school. But I didn't think as a commercial matter it was the kind of thing that was going to work. In the good horror films I've seen, there's always a twist at the end that scares you a lot. I begged him to write some kind of twist.
There we go, ready, and action.
Bob wanted a car to pull up and Nancy to get into it and then see Freddie at the wheel. We had a lot of arguments about that.
Wes said, that's terrible. Well, it's really bad. You're screwing up the whole thing. And so he tried, and I tried, and we all were working on different things.
It is a little disconcerting shooting all sorts of different endings as an actor. Who's in charge here? Let's just make an ending. Let's just get this over with.
Bob wanted to have a hook for a sequel. I thought it was demeaning to the picture, didn't need it, and all those things. But I have to say, was very grateful to Bob for making the picture possible. So we reached a compromise. Freddie wouldn't be driving, but the car itself would have Freddie's stripes.
And then you cut to the mother, which is one of my favorite things.
Bob, we have to have this last shot of, pulling Ronnie Blakely through the door. You don't need that shot. Give us one shot. Okay, you can have one shot. And so we rolled, and that thing just flew through that. I don't know how they did it, but, it was one take, and we were out of there. We shut down, and that was it.
The editing was done in New York. That was obviously because we didn't even have an office out here at this point.
The first time I saw the film, Bob and the editor and I sat in a screening room, and they rolled the film. Film finished, and the lights came up, and there was a long pause, and then Bob turned around, put his arm over the chair. I'll never forget this, and looked at me and says, do you think there's a film there at all? I said, yeah. I think we cut for, 4 or 5 weeks. Suddenly this terrific film emerged.
Was intense, but very, very exciting. The big challenge was how much to show of him physically. We didn't want to overdo it in terms of the scary thing in the movie being too much in your face. And of course his voice was so good as well that he was able to create tension without seeing him.
One of the really effective things about this movie is that when you're shifting between the nightmares and dreams and actual reality, it's not that obvious.
I thought it was great what Wes was doing because half the time I couldn't tell what was a dream and what was reality, even in the dailies. It fed in beautifully into what we tried to do editorially, which was kind of seamlessly go from reality into dreams. I think it played into the movie in a really wonderful way so that often you wouldn't quite know where you were. The sound of Freddie's fingers rubbing on metal. Wes spent quite a bit of time with the sound editors getting just the kind of sound that would make your spine tingle.
Then we hired a composer, Charles Bernstein, who turned out to be brilliant.
This was a very low-budget situation. So our early conversations were kind of about how we were going to do this thing on very little money. I suggested to Wes, maybe I'll do this thing at home, and I'll play all the instruments, and I'll sing all the parts. I think I can do this thing without an orchestra.
I want to have a theme to the music that is unmistakable and that we can have reoccurring throughout. And I'd written this little doggerel thing in the film, 1, 2, Freddy's coming for you, 3, 4, better lock your door. I said, maybe you could set that to music.
Da, 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 da. 1, 2, Freddy's coming for you.
It's very thematic, but I wanted it to have a melody. Da da dee da 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 da.
We had to deal with the rating board, which made us cut some things they didn't like.
I tend to block bad memories, but I do remember that the whole blood coming out of the bed had to be cut short. And I know that we had to cut short Amanda when she hit the bed. There was a big splash of blood. They made us cut that off very short. It was extremely painful to have to do that. I still, to this day, hate that sort of censorship.
I really started getting excited when we took the film to MIFED in Milan, which is a foreign film sales convention. All of the skeptical investors and home video people and all the yada, all of a sudden they would get very quiet when they walked out. Everybody had a sense that this was a film that was really going to work.
Everything is together. We've got a release date. Publicity was out and the TV spots and everything had been done. It was a big deal for us. The week before we were supposed to open, the lab we were using wouldn't release the negative because they hadn't been paid. We didn't have the money to pay them. Bob somehow worked out some kind of deal to pay the lab all of their costs. Bob got the movie made because otherwise there would have been no prints on the screen. That weekend, the film did well. I think it was #1.
Beyond any expectation. It just became a big hit. Wes was a wonderful director, and Bob Shea is fabulous. We have a new producer in town.
It's a hit. People were lining up down Broadway to see this movie. It was like live theater. I mean, people were running down the aisles, talking to the screen.
Don't go there. Don't go up the stairs, girlfriend.
Don't fall asleep. He's behind you.
They were seeing something that they had never seen before. It was a confirmation of all these things that Wes had been trying to make people understand for years. He was so right.
As it played, its reputation grew.
All over the country. It wasn't just a New York movie or a Los Angeles movie.
Nightmare on Elm Street played for everybody in all cultures because everybody has to fall asleep at night.
It became a cultural phenomenon.
I did a show once with Robert, and as soon as Robert walked out, the kids stood up and started chanting, "Freddy, Freddy."
I have never liked him in the way that his fans liked him. I always felt like he was like the sickest, most depraved, disgusting, evil, devil character. That's what's wrong with our world. Are the Freddy Kruegers in our world?
I was watching television one night, and the President of the United States referred to Freddy Krueger.
The truth is that when you take a walk down our opposition's memory lane, it starts to look like Nightmare on Elm Street.
It's become part of the culture. You have no control over that, and it goes where it's going to go.
Through video, it had such a huge following. That's when people would come up to me, and I was like, oh my gosh.
There's millions of fans now. They just love every single moment of that film, and they've memorized every line.
This is just a dream. This isn't real.
And then there's girls who really love Nancy and are inspired by her strength. It's just amazing to me.
I don't think it's an accident that A Nightmare on Elm Street would come to be made in the mid-'80s. We had AIDS, we had an economy that was going to collapse, and in the midst of this you get this vision. All right, we're going to show you Elm Street.
It's the disintegrating middle class, the single parents and alcoholic parents and neglectful parents. Freddy's punishing white bread America.
This is a film about people being put in jeopardy by lies.
You knew about him all this time? And you've been acting like it was something I made up?
Freddy wants to destroy you because you are innocent in your youth and you have your whole life ahead of you.
Freddy kind of spits the last minutes of adolescence back in the faces of his victims.
You die. Freddy Krueger is in everybody's mind, the boogeyman. You think of Freddy Krueger.
I always think Freddy's in the parking lot when I'm walking in my car at night. I hear an elevator and I think Freddy's going to step out of it. I dream of Freddy all the time. It's a terrible thing. It's a terrible thing.
Whatever you do, don't fall asleep.
Nightmare on Elm Street is a bona fide classic in the same pantheon as The Exorcist, Psycho, and Night of the Living Dead.
Freddy certainly was a star, kind of the father figure who takes delight in killing innocents and delights in evil.
He became a character in American horror, the equal of Frankenstein and Dracula.
Just seemed like ancient tragedy in a way, so it felt very classical.
It was about the story, and it was a really, really good story.
This is a smart, interesting little movie. It deals with reality and fantasy blending.
It was one of my very first jobs at all. I didn't really know what I was getting myself into.
The scene in the bedroom where the girl is going up the wall.
Nobody's ever really done that kind of thing before.
No apologies, nothing politically correct about it. Pushing the envelope, Wes Craven, come on down.
Gonna get you.
When I try to think of where becoming a horror film director came from, I can only speculate. First of all, I never thought of making movies until I was almost 30. I was raised in a fundamentalist Baptist church. Almost all social things of any import were really within the church. And one of the beliefs they had, besides you can't play cards and dance and smoke and drink alcohol, was that you don't go to movies because they're kind of the devil's playground. My father was buried in 45, somewhere around my 6th birthday. The few memories that I have of my father, I was really scared of him. He had an explosive temper, and you had the feeling like he could kill you at any time. It was just, one of those kind of guys. My first year in college, I came down with this very strange, unexpected paralysis. And during that time, when I came fairly close to death, I started writing poetry. That and my love of books and novels started going into writing short stories and things like that, but none of them were, about horror. Films didn't really happen until I started teaching college. We had an art theater that me up quite frequently.
Where are you, Kruger?
Kruger. It sounded very German and reminded me of one of the big war plants in Nazi Germany, and also it was an extension of Krug, who was the lead character in Last House on the Left. Freddy's hat was exactly the hat of a man who had scared me when I was a little kid, who I think was a drunk walking down the street. He just somehow knew I was there, and he stopped and he looked right at me and just held that. It just scared the shit out of me. His sweater colors were out of an article I read in Scientific American, that these two colors were the most difficult for the human cornea or human eye to put side by side. The claws were the sort of pièce de résistance, and it was like, well, what does he have? Does he have a knife? Does he have a sickle? I think at that time we had a cat, and I just saw the cat doing this. I was like, oh, yeah, right.
You want to know who Fred Krueger was? He was a filthy child murderer who killed at least 20 kids in the neighborhood.
The worst crime imaginable to me is to harm a child. The fact that he was a child murderer and a child molester was just about the most loathsome creature I could imagine on the level of what he did. The big problem was, how do you fight somebody like that? It became a matter of having a central character, Nancy, that dared to go into the nightmares, go into his territory. That's when I started poking around lucid dreaming and that concept that you can go into a dream and be awake. And I just invented this little conceit that if you were holding something when you woke up, it would come with you back into your reality.
I brought something out from my dream.
I would tell it in about a minute, and people would go, oh, I'd go see that in a second.
In the early 80s, I think Wes had his first draft of the script, and the agent had shopped it around. Most people just said, I don't know if it'll work. I just don't you have anything else? The only person that believed in it was Bob Shea. Bob was running New Line Pictures, which I think at the time was a 16mm distribution company.
At that time, Bob Shea and New Line Cinema were a tiny little, almost a storefront in lower Manhattan. That wasn't who I wanted to, make the movie for 10 cents, so it went around to Hollywood too, but nobody got it except Bob.
I said I thought that sounded fantastic because it
showed all the European films, fantastic Bergman and Fellini films, this amazing sort of fluorescence of astonishing films. That was my notion, is I want to do something like that. Quit my job. I just went to New York to figure out how to make films. The whole idea of doing a horror film never would have occurred to me. Really, it just was a matter of my having been working for this guy, Sean Cunningham, who hired me to do some syncing up dailies.
Around 1970 is when I first started to make films. I really didn't know how, and I was learning how to make all of these mistakes and how to make movies. In the middle of all of that, I meet this guy named Wes Craven. He was a rock. I mean, he was a terrific assistant and he became a really good editor. After we had worked together for almost a year, it was like, I've got an idea, let's make a movie. We were able to get some people to put up money because of our previous relationship.
Sean said, you know, the backers want a scary movie. Do you ever think of writing something scary? I said, no. He said, well, go write something scary, and if they like it, you can direct it. On a weekend, in 3 days, I wrote Last House on the Left. Kind of a raucous, balls to the walls, escaped criminals doing horrible things movie.
The picture turned out to be very, very strong. You got to see Wes's special sensitivity for this scary, dark arena.
I don't think Sean or I thought that anybody would really see it. When it opened, it kind of created a sensation, and there were riots and protests, and people tried to get into the projection booth to destroy it. I felt like, hey, maybe we got something here.
After Last House was released, Wes felt that he had his sample reel and had a kind of a hit movie.
Actually, after Last House, I didn't make another film for, I think, almost 5 years because I was trying to do other kinds of films. And then at a certain point, a friend said, I can get you money to make a scary movie, write something else scary. That became Hills of Eyes.
The Hills Have Eyes, another sort of strange, stark, semi-horror thing which he was able to get done. And at the same time, Wes had moved to California, was trying to make his career here and got to do a couple of movies. Wes became a successful director, but he's still haunted by this idea of going back and trying to do this special movie.
Nightmare was written after I'd done 2 films back to back. I had made enough money on them to take 6 months off. So I basically took 6 months off and wrote and refined the script, Nightmare on Elm Street. Nightmare on Elm Street as a story seems to have its roots in these articles in the Los Angeles Times. The first article was about a young man, Asian descent, dying in the middle of a nightmare. He and the family had come out of relocation camps in Southeast Asia during the time of Pol Pot, when hundreds of thousands of people were just being slaughtered. About a year later, there was a second article. Then about 6 months later, the third, and the third one just got me. That was a young man whose father was a doctor. They had come out of relocation camps. He was having nightmares, and he was telling his family that there's something after me, and I'm afraid if I don't stay awake, it'll kill me. This kid decided he was going to stay awake. Sleeping pills the father had been demanding that he take were found under his pillow. He hadn't taken any of them. And he had a coffee pot in his closet full of black coffee with a long extension cord that he had hidden behind curtains. They were all sitting in the living room watching a movie, and he just kind of fell asleep. Carried him upstairs, put him to bed, pulled the covers over him, and everybody goes, thank God. Everybody goes to bed in the middle of the night. They hear screaming. They run into his room, and before they get to him, he is dead. Oh man, I got to do a movie about that.
There are so many horror films that have used the dream motif. If we go back to The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari, the entire film is seen as a nightmare. They chose to make the sets distorted, expressionistic, nightmarish. But there was never a situation where a character lived exclusively in a dream world.
Since I was in college, I've been writing down dreams and remembering my dreams, so I was kind of familiar with the whole landscape. I've always felt like nightmares are the horror movies of the psyche. Conversely, horror films are kind of the nightmares of a culture. They talk about the things that our normal, rational mind or our polite society doesn't really want to bring to the dinner table. I was trying with Nightmare on Elm Street to think in archetypes. It was very much built on a system of kind of archetypical thinking and nightmares.
It was right in there that Wes started to talk to me about this character that operated in dreams and was able to cross over into real life.
Right away, I thought, you have to have an antagonist. You have to have the killer. And then it was a matter of just kind of designing him. By that time, Halloween had come out and Friday the 13th had come out, and they both were very powerful and successful films, and they had somebody in a mask. At a certain point, I thought, kill him in fire, and then he can have a mask of just scar tissue, and yet he'll be able to be articulate.
Fred Krueger, Mom. Fred Krueger.
Freddy, the name, was the name of a kid who used to be...
Had an element that I'm always looking for, which is something that all audiences can relate to, and everybody, of course, could relate to. Scary dreams and nightmares.
Bob absolutely believed that Wes was onto something, and he wanted a shot at the big time. The bad news is Bob didn't have any money. He spent months and months, if not years, trying to get the money together to shoot this movie.
With great pain and suffering, I will tell you that. As much the pain and suffering you go through making a film is nowhere near the pain and suffering you go through financing it. In this case, I had to raise all the money outside.
He raised the money basically, I'm sure, from his own money, and I'm sure from friends and family. And then he was looking for the major investor. ᴛɪ̀ᴍᴇ was going to advance him $1 million for the picture. A week later, he called me and said they dropped out.
Just about 2 weeks before we started shooting, he basically said, you guys should all just go home and I'll call you if I find money. And it was like, oh man, so close, you know.
Bob told me, go back to LA and tell everyone that they're going to have to just work for free for a while. John Burroughs, our line producer, put up his own money.
I'll use my credit card and I'll pay the crew. It was like $8,000 or $9,000.
Remember at that time, Bob has a thing about fingernails and kind of digging at them, and I looked over and they were all just bloody, and I realized the incredible amount of stress that comes from raising money and trying to get back into a picture. Somehow he found the money.
We had one final meeting with Media Home Entertainment, a guy named Joe Wolf who owned that company, and they were big home video distributors. Finally made a deal where Joe Wolf could take over the whole movie if I didn't get my commitment together in 3 or 4 weeks. I managed to then go to the ᴛɪ̀ᴍᴜ guy and browbeat him into agreeing to put up the last few $100,000.
Bob didn't like it, but he had to take it. He was stuck. We went ahead and made the picture, but Bob will always remember that he was really giving his blood. You know, he said, John, I hate it, I hate it, I hate it. The casting director was Annette Benson. She started bringing in people for Wes to talk to.
You know, you make a lot of decisions when you start off on a film in casting that you're going to be married to, and if you make one wrong decision, it can just kill the film. Nancy was played by this young woman